The silver tray was waiting for Rosamund Ellery before anyone had the courage to tell her she was meant to carry it. It stood on the narrow table in the servants' passage beneath Calderwick House, polished until it caught the yellow wall light and threw it back like a cold accusation. Upon it rested a covered dish, a pot of tea wrapped in linen, a china cup thin enough for a duchess's fingers, a folded napkin, sliced pears, and a single cream rose in a glass, no taller than Rosamund's palm. Beneath the napkin lay a folded order sealed in black wax, with the mark of the House of Calderwick. The seal should have made the matter official. Instead, it made the air feel dishonest. "Blue Bedchamber," Mrs. Hodge said. The housekeeper's voice had the clipped patience of a woman who preferred obedience to understanding. "At once, Miss Ellery." "The lady does not care to be kept waiting." Rosamund looked from the tray to the folded order. 3 years in Lady Dorothea Fane's household had taught her that humiliation rarely arrived shouting. It came wrapped in propriety. It came with a task placed in one's hands and a room full of people pretending not to see what the task truly meant. "I believe there has been a mistake," she said. Her voice remained level. Poverty had taken many things from her, but not that. "No mistake." Mrs. Hodge glanced toward the footman by the stair, who suddenly found great interest in the flagstones. "Lady Dorothea said you were to make yourself useful." Useful. The word had been placed upon Rosamund so often that it had begun to feel less like a description and more like a collar. Useful meant copying invitations until midnight, because paper was cheaper than paid assistance. Useful meant reading aloud to Lady Dorothea when her eyes were tired, fetching shawls for guests. Knew perfectly well Rosamund had been born a gentlewoman, and accepting altered gowns with gratitude sharp enough to cut. Useful meant shelter, but never safety. "Who wrote the order?" Rosamund asked. Mrs. Hodge's mouth tightened. "You ask a great many questions for a young lady who has been generously received." A dependent woman learned the shape of that warning before she learned the content. Generosity could be turned at any moment into debt. Debt could be turned into silence. Rosamund lowered her eyes to the black wax. The Calderwick crest had been pressed unevenly, blurred at the lower edge. She had seen only 2 letters from His Grace Sebastian Vale, Duke of Calderwick, since his aunt had brought her to the house. His hand was disciplined, narrow, severe. The writing on the folded order was heavier, less controlled, as if the writer had studied authority without ever possessing it. "If the order is from His Grace, the hand is unfamiliar," she said. Mrs. Hodge's stare cooled. The blue bedchamber now. Behind the linen shelves, a soft sound made Rosamund turn. Pippa stood half-hidden, with a basket against her hip, her young face pale under a dusting of freckles. The girl was barely 17, and small enough to seem younger when frightened. Her hands were red from washing stone steps. She looked from the tray to Mrs. Hodge, and then to Rosamund with a plea she did not dare speak. Rosamund understood at once. If she refused, Pippa would be sent. Pippa would tremble. Pippa would spill something, or be accused of spilling something, and the woman upstairs would have a new amusement before noon. Rosamund slid both hands beneath the tray handles. The silver was heavier than she expected. Heat from the teapot pressed through the cloth against the tender inside of her wrist. "Very well," she said. "I shall carry it." Mrs. Hodge's expression softened into satisfaction. That was the cruelty of it. She had made obedience look like consent. Rosamund climbed the back stairs because no one had told her she might use the main staircase. Each step made the china whisper against silver. Above, Calderwick House waited in all its Mayfair splendor, with marble floors, dark portraits, carved banisters, and carpets thick enough to swallow evidence. The Duke had been away in the north for weeks, and in his absence Lady Dorothea had filled the house with soft voices and sealed doors. The most dangerous of those voices belonged to Mrs. Lavinia Dane, a widow with pale hair, expensive mourning, and the habit of smiling as if every person nearby had already been arranged for her use. She had arrived under Lady Dorothea's protection, but within 2 days the servants had begun lowering their voices. By the 4th, one kitchen maid, had said the forbidden word. Mistress. Not mistress as a household title, mistress as scandal. The Duke's mistress. Rosamund had pretended not to hear, because poor relations survived by not hearing. Yet now she was walking toward the Blue Bedchamber with breakfast in her hands, and the pretense had been placed upon a tray. At the landing she paused only long enough to remember herself. Miss Rosamund Ellery, daughter of the late Edmund Ellery of Graceham Rectory. Gentlewoman by birth, poor by circumstance, indebted through no sin of her own. Not less because others had discovered how to use her need. She nudged the door with her elbow. It opened with a faint sigh. The room glowed with pale morning and firelight. Heavy blue curtains framed a narrow view of London sky. Mrs. Lavinia Dane reclined against pillows trimmed in lace, her fair hair arranged in loose waves too graceful to be accidental. Around her shoulders lay a dove-grey shawl embroidered with pearls. Rosamund knew it before she knew why her breath had shortened. The shawl matched the one in the portrait of the late Duchess above the second landing. The woman in the bed wore a dead Duchess's memory, as if it had been laid out for her triumph. Lavinia turned her head slowly. At last, Rosamund carried the tray to the small table near the bed. A drop of tea slid from the spout and touched her wrist. Pain flashed bright and clean. She lowered the tray without a sound. Lavinia noticed. That was the worst of it. She noticed and smiled. "You are Miss Ellery, are you not?" "I am, Lady Dorothea's companion." The pause before companion made the word shrink. "Yes, how convenient. I prefer a gentle hand in the morning." Maids can be so clumsy. Rosamund unfolded the napkin, because still hands were safer than honest ones. "Your breakfast, Mrs. Dane." "Pour the tea." The command fell gently. That made it uglier. Rosamund looked at the cup, then at the woman in the Duchess's shawl. "I had not understood that my place in this house included bedchamber service." Lavinia's eyes brightened, not with surprise, but with pleasure. "Place is such a delicate word, Miss Ellery. People cling to it long after the world has ceased to honor the claim." The fire shifted in the grate. Outside, as carriage passed over the street stones, Rosamund could refuse. She could say she was not a maid, not a servant, not a creature to be summoned into a bedchamber for sport. Then, Lady Dorothea would call it pride. Mrs. Hodge would call it ingratitude. Lavinia would call it misunderstanding, and Pippa would still be sent upstairs next time. Rosamund poured the tea. Steam rose between them, fragrant and civilized. "Milk first," Lavinia said. "No, not so much. 1 sugar. You must learn quickly if you mean to be useful in a house like this." Rosamund placed the sugar in the cup. Usefulness is not the same as belonging. Lavinia accepted the tea without thanks. "No. It is what one cultivates when belonging is no longer available." The words found their mark because they were not shouted. They slipped beneath the ribs, precise and cold. Rosamund let no sign of it reach her face. That restraint seemed to irritate Lavinia. "The toast is cool," it was not. Warmth still lifted from beneath the silver cover. "Shall I send for more?" "No." "Stand there," Rosamund stilled. "I beg your pardon?" "Stand there. I dislike eating alone." Nothing improper had been said. That was the genius of it. A guest had asked for tea. A companion had poured it. A widow had requested company. If Rosamund repeated the story later, the words would sound harmless, and only the room would know that she had been made to stand like proof of another woman's power. She stood beside the bed while Lavinia tasted pear slices and buttered toast with slow enjoyment. 6 minutes passed, then 9. Rosamund fixed her eyes on the mantel clock and counted not the seconds, but the things she would not allow this room to take from her. Her name, her posture, her memory, her ability to recognize cruelty even when it wore pearls. Lavinia looked her over with a mild frown. "You are not married?" "No. No prospects? None that concern this breakfast." Lavinia laughed softly. A proud answer. "Pride is expensive, Miss Ellery." "Are you certain you can afford it?" Rosamund turned her gaze from the clock to the woman in the bed. "I am certain it has cost me less than surrender would." For the first time, Lavinia's smile failed to rise at once. Then she set down her cup. "You may take the tray." Rosamund lifted it again. The teapot shifted, toward her burned wrist, and pain traveled up her arm. She did not flinch. At the door, the folded order slid from beneath the napkin and struck the rim. The cracked black seal showed again. Calderwick, blurred, wrong. She balanced the tray against her hip and stepped into the corridor. Only there, beyond Lavinia's sight, did she permit herself one shallow breath. It was not weakness. It was proof she had remained human. The passage outside the Blue Bedchamber stood unnaturally still. No maid crossed, no footman approached. Even the light seemed to hold itself back. Rosamund lowered her eyes to the tray and saw one drop of tea staining the linen amber beside the folded order. Her wrist burned. Her pride burned more quietly. Then, from the head of the main staircase, where no one should have been at that hour, came the measured sound of a gentleman's steps. One step, then another. Slow, controlled, unmistakably approaching. Rosamund stilled with the silver tray in her hands. A tall shadow fell across the blue carpet, and the house seemed to stop breathing. The man at the end of the corridor did not ask why a gentlewoman stood outside a bedchamber with a breakfast tray in her hands. He looked first at the tray, then at the folded order lying against the stained napkin, then at Rosamund's face. Only after that did his eyes lower to the red mark on her wrist. His stillness changed the corridor more than anger would have done. The footman behind him whispered, "His Grace," as if the words themselves had discovered the room too late. Rosamund knew him at once. Every portrait in Calderwick House had prepared her for the line of his jaw, the dark control of his posture, the old authority carried without effort. Yet no portrait had captured the coldness that entered his expression now. His Grace Sebastian Vale, Duke of Calderwick, had returned before anyone had prepared the house to lie properly. Travel dust still touched the hem of his greatcoat. One glove had been pulled halfway from his hand. He looked as though he had come from the road, directly into a scene his household had hoped would be finished before he arrived. "Miss Ellery," he said. The use of her name struck the corridor like a correction. Not girl, not companion, not useful creature, Miss Ellery. Rosamund dipped into as much of a curtsy as the weight of the tray allowed. "Your Grace." The china trembled faintly. She hated that it did. His gaze moved again to her wrist, and the cold in his face became more precise. "Give the tray, Your Grace. I can carry it below." No. It was not loud. It did not need to be. He stepped toward her and took the handles with controlled care, so that his gloved fingers did not touch her skin. The tray left her hands, and only then did she realize how tightly she had been holding it. The absence of weight made her arms feel strangely hollow. The Duke set the tray on the narrow side table by the wall, not carelessly, but as if it had become evidence. He lifted the folded order by its edge. The cracked black wax faced him. His eyes narrowed. Behind Rosamund, the Blue Bedchamber door opened a little wider. Silk rustled. Lavinia Dane appeared in the doorway, one hand arranged at her throat upon the dove-grey shawl. She looked surprised in the graceful manner of a woman who had expected to be discovered and had practiced innocence in a mirror. "Sebastian," she said softly. "You have returned." The Christian name seemed to move through the corridor with its own scandal. A maid at the far end dropped her eyes. Mrs. Hodge had appeared near the stair, pale and rigid. Rosamund looked at the carpet, because looking at Lavinia would give the woman too much of what she wanted. The Duke did not turn toward her immediately. He opened the folded order and read it. His expression gave away nothing, but the fingers holding the page became very still. "Who wrote this?" No one answered. Lavinia gave a small laugh. "My dear Sebastian, must we begin with questions? You arrive travel-worn, and the first thing you find is a breakfast tray. It isn't a matter for severity. Do not call me Sebastian in my corridor." The words were quiet enough to be polite, and cold enough to end the habit forever. Lavinia's smile faltered. Only for a breath. Then she recovered. "Of course, Your Grace. I meant no impropriety. You are standing in my mother's rooms." He looked then at the shawl about her shoulders. "Wearing my mother's shawl." The corridor seemed to empty of warmth. Lavinia's hand tightened once upon the embroidery. "It was laid out for me." I thought it was meant as a kindness. My mother's shawls are kept in a locked press. His gaze shifted to the tray. And that tray belongs at Brackenley. It is not common breakfast silver, Mrs. Hodge made the smallest sound. The Duke heard it, but he still did not look at her. Rosamund felt the strange terror of being present, while a powerful man began counting wrongs one by one. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt exposed. If he thought she had willingly participated in this tableau, if he believed she had carried the tray to place herself near scandal, then his protection could turn into judgment before she drew another breath. "Your Grace," she said, "I was instructed to bring it." His eyes returned to her. "By whom?" "Mrs. Hodge gave me the tray," she said. "Lady Dorothea ordered it." Mrs. Hodge stepped forward. "Your Grace, I received a written instruction under the Calderwick seal. I had no wish to trouble Miss Ellery, but Lady Dorothea said she was to make herself useful." The word sounded uglier in the Duke's presence. He looked at the housekeeper at last. "Useful, Mrs. Hodge swallowed. "Yes, Your Grace. Miss Ellery is a gentlewoman in this house." "Yes, Your Grace, but Lady Dorothea has always said that she is pleased to assist where needed. Assistance is not bedchamber service." The sentence was flat, final. He turned back to Rosamund. "Were you asked to pour tea?" Lavinia answered before she could. "I asked for ordinary courtesy." Miss Ellery seemed perfectly willing. Rosamund felt the old net close. Willing, eager, useful. Words that made coercion sound like character. The Duke did not glance at Lavinia. "Miss Ellery can answer for herself." It was such a simple mercy that Rosamund nearly failed to speak. "Yes, Your Grace. Mrs. Dane asked me to pour tea." "And afterward?" She hesitated. There were humiliations too small to survive repetition. Once spoken aloud, they risked sounding petty, and yet their smallness had been the weapon. "She asked me to stand while she ate." The footman by the stair drew in a breath and forgot to hide it. Lavinia's face smoothed into injured patience. How dramatically put. "I dislike eating alone." "Surely that is not a crime." "No," the Duke said. "It is not a crime." He folded the order. "It is a choice." Lavinia's smile sharpened. "Then perhaps we are all guilty of choices. Not all choices are equal when one person has a room and another has nowhere safe to refuse." Rosamund looked up before she could stop herself. The Duke's face remained controlled, but his eyes held the corridor like a locked door. He understood. Not all of it. No man born to a dukedom could understand completely what it meant to depend upon mercy that arrived with accounts attached. But he understood enough to name the shape of it. Lavinia must have understood that too, because her voice changed. "You are allowing a young woman's wounded pride to make this larger than it is. Her wrist is burned. A drop of tea, surely. Do not reduce what you caused, because it is inconvenient to see it." The words struck softly and deeply. Rosamund felt them in the place where she had been trying not to feel the burn. The Duke turned to Mrs. Hodge. "Cool water and clean linen will be sent to the morning room, not the servants' hall." Mrs. Hodge's face paled further. "Yes, Your Grace. Miss Ellery is not to be rung for. She is not to be sent to any bedchamber. She is not to carry orders under my name, unless the order is given by me directly, or entered through Mr. Bellamy in the household book. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Grace. Repeat it to every servant below stairs." Mrs. Hodge bent her head. "Yes, Your Grace." The correction moved through the watching servants as surely as rumor had moved through them before. It did not erase what they had seen. It changed what they were permitted to pretend about it. Lavinia stepped fully into the corridor. Now, the shawl gathered more tightly around her. This is an extraordinary amount of command over a breakfast misunderstanding. Then we shall make it less of a misunderstanding. The Duke held up the folded order. This was not written by me. Silence took the corridor in one swift motion. Even Lavinia's face lost its softness. "How can you know that from a glance?" she asked. "Because it is my name," his reply carried no vanity, only fact. Rosamund found herself looking at the folded page again. He had seen the wrongness as she had, perhaps faster. The thought should not have warmed her. It did. A shared observation in a corridor full of denial felt almost like shelter. Miss Ellery, he said, you looked at the seal before you carried the tray. Yes. What did you see? The question startled her. He was not asking whether she was hurt. He was not asking whether she was grateful. He was asking what she had noticed. The impression is blurred along the lower edge. The wax is cracked. The hand is heavier than yours, or at least heavier than the letters of yours I have seen. How many have you seen? 2. Both copied for Lady Dorothea's correspondence records. And you remember the hand? I remember things I am not expected to remember. The answer left her before she could soften it. Lavinia's eyes narrowed. The Duke's gaze held steady. That may prove useful. The word might have hurt if he had used it as others did. He did not. In his mouth, useful sounded like capable, not owned. Mr. Bellamy appeared at the stair then, summoned perhaps by instinct or by the spreading unease of a house caught misbehaving. The butler bowed deeply. Your Grace, we were not informed you had arrived. Clearly. A flicker crossed Mr. Bellamy's face and vanished. How may I serve? The Duke handed him the folded order. Keep this. Touch only the edges. Bring me the household order book, the key register, and the names of every person who entered this corridor since dawn. At once, Your Grace, and Mr. Bellamy. Yes, Your Grace. No one leaves the house until I know who used my seal. The words fell without flourish. That made them more terrifying. Lavinia drew herself upright. You cannot mean to detain guests. I mean to preserve the truth before it is dressed for travel. Her eyes flashed. I am not accustomed to being treated as a suspect. Then perhaps the morning will instruct you. Rosamund should not have felt any satisfaction. Satisfaction was dangerous when one still depended on the house where one stood. Yet something in her chest loosened, not enough for comfort, enough for breath. The Duke turned back to her. Your wrist? It is only a small burn. That was not my question. His voice gentled by the smallest degree, and that slight change unsettled her more than sternness. Will you allow it to be tended? No one had asked permission all morning. Not before the tray, not before the tea, not before the standing. Permission, offered plainly, felt almost indecent in its kindness. Yes, Your Grace. He stepped aside, opening the path toward the main corridor rather than the servants' stairs. The distinction was clear to everyone watching. Servants went below. Guests were received above. Gentlewomen were not hidden with coal scuttles and copper pans because their discomfort embarrassed those who caused it. Lavinia gave a soft laugh behind them. How gallant. I wonder, Miss Ellery, whether you often inspire men to rescue you so swiftly. The corridor leaned toward the answer. Rosamund knew the trap. If she accepted rescue too eagerly, she became ambitious. If she rejected it sharply, she became ungrateful. She met Lavinia's gaze. I have little practice being rescued, Mrs. Dane. I have had rather more practice surviving without it. The Duke's hand stilled at his side. The servants did not move. Lavinia's smile disappeared, as if someone had closed a door over it. Rosamund turned before the woman could answer. She walked toward the morning room, with her wrist burning, her name restored, and the Duke of Calderwick beside her, not touching, not speaking, but making every person in the corridor remember that they had seen enough to be held accountable. Behind them, the silver tray remained on the side table, gleaming under the corridor light, with the folded order gone from its linen. It no longer looked like breakfast. It looked like the beginning of evidence. The morning room received Rosamund as if it had never been intended for her, and yet could no longer deny her entrance. Sunlight lay over green silk chairs, a rosewood writing table, and a marble hearth where no fire had been lit, because the room was meant for gentle conversation, not evidence. The Duke held the door open, long enough for her to pass without brushing against him. That single courtesy unsettled her more than Lavinia's cruelty had done. Cruelty had familiar rules. Courtesy, when offered without a debt attached, left her without armor. Sit, Miss Ellery, he said. She looked at the chair nearest the window, then at the carpet before it. 3 years in Lady Dorothea's care had trained her to stand until invited twice, sometimes 3 times, lest anyone decide her comfort was presumption. The Duke noticed the pause. his expression altered by no more than a breath. "Please." The word was quiet. It made refusal harder than command. Rosamund sat. Her hands rested in her lap, the burned wrist held carefully away from the fabric of her gown. The skin had reddened into a narrow mark. It was not serious. It was not even the worst thing that had happened that morning. Yet the Duke looked at it as if small injuries mattered, because they proved the presence of larger ones. Mrs. Hodge entered with a basin, clean linen, and the rigid face of a woman carrying her own correction. "Set it there," the Duke said. "Miss Ellery may tend to her wrist unless she wishes assistance." Mrs. Hodge looked startled, as though a dependent woman being asked what she wished was a disturbance in household order. Rosamund reached for the linen herself. "I can manage, thank you." The water was cool enough to make her breath catch when she pressed the cloth against the burn. She turned her face slightly toward the window until the first sharpness passed. When she looked back, the Duke was watching, not with pity, but with attention. That was worse, because pity could be endured by lowering one's eyes. Attention required one to remain a person, Mr. Bellamy arrived with the household order book, the key register, and the folded order, placed on a silver salver as carefully as if it were a legal document. He also carried the tray, now wrapped in plain white linen, and set it on a side table at the Duke's direction. Rosamund's fingers tightened around the damp cloth. Even covered, the thing changed the room. It had become the shape of what had been done to her. "Mrs. Hodge," the Duke said, "state precisely how this order came into your hands." The housekeeper clasped her keys at her waist. "It was left on the breakfast table below stairs, Your Grace, sealed. I believed it to be from you. You believed I had returned secretly, written a breakfast order for a guest in my mother's room, and chosen Miss Ellery to carry it." Colour crept up Mrs. Hodge's neck. Lady Dorothea had said Miss Ellery was to be of use this morning. That was not my question. "No, Your Grace, answer it." Mrs. Hodge's mouth pinched. "I thought the instruction came through family authority." "Whose family authority?" The door opened before Mrs. Hodge could answer. Lady Dorothea Fane entered in a gown of dark plum silk, already gloved though the morning had hardly begun. She carried the scent of lavender and long habit. She did not look toward Rosamund first. That omission was deliberate. "Sebastian," she said, "I hear you have returned in a temper and frightened half the household over a breakfast tray. You hear quickly. A well-managed house speaks to its mistress." The Duke's eyes cooled. "This house has no mistress." Lady Dorothea's smile remained, but its edges tightened. A figure of speech. "Don't be severe before coffee." She turned then at last to Rosamund. "My dear Miss Ellery, you look pale. Such a storm over a small service must have unsettled you." Rosamund held the linen to her wrist and rose because long training moved faster than new permission. The Duke spoke before she fully stood. "Remain seated." Lady Dorothea's eyes flicked to him. "Really, Sebastian, Miss Ellery is injured. A little tea, I am told. Poor child. She has always been sensitive to slights, though I hoped time would soften that tendency." Rosamund felt the sentence settle over her, like dust. It made pain into temperament. It made protest into character flaw. Before the Duke could answer, she said, "I am sensitive to accuracy, my lady. It is a different condition." Lady Dorothea's attention sharpened. The Duke did not smile, but something in the room seemed to take one step toward Rosamund. "Accuracy, then," he said. "Lady Dorothea, did you instruct Mrs. Hodge to send Miss Ellery to the Blue Bedchamber?" Lady Dorothea removed one glove finger by finger. "I remarked that Miss Ellery might assist where necessary. I did not compose a ceremonial dispatch. Did you know Mrs. Dane was lodged there? Naturally. I assigned the room, my mother's room. The Blue Bedchamber has been empty for years. You cannot expect a London house to become a shrine because grief made you sentimental." The words were aimed at him, but Rosamund saw them strike somewhere old. The Duke's face did not change. That made the strike clearer. "My sentiment does not explain my mother's shawl on Mrs. Dane's shoulders." Lady Dorothea's lashes lowered. "Lavinia admired it. I may have allowed her to borrow it. A harmless indulgence. From a locked press, I hold several household keys, as you know. Your mother trusted me with such matters. My mother trusted many people before death made her unable to revise the list. Mrs. Hodge looked down. Mr. Bellamy looked at the order book. Lady Dorothea's colour rose, not enough to shame her, but enough to show she had been touched. This is ungracious. No, the Duke said. It is delayed. He opened the order book. Mr. Bellamy, is there an entry authorizing breakfast service to the Blue Bedchamber? No, Your Grace. Is there an entry authorizing removal of the bracken lay tray from family silver? No, Your Grace. Is there an entry granting Miss Ellery bedchamber duty? Mr. Bellamy's gaze moved once toward Rosamund, not with pity, but with apology on behalf of order itself. No, Your Grace. Lady Dorothea gave a soft laugh. Every kindness in this house be entered in a book. Miss Ellery has eaten at my table, worn gowns I provided, lived under my protection. A small service in return is hardly servitude. The word hung there. Rosamund felt all the old accounts open at once. Food, dresses, shelter. A doctor paid for her mother in the last fever. Letters copied, pride swallowed, gratitude rehearsed until it sounded like prayer. The Duke closed the order book. Gratitude is not servitude. The room stilled. Lady Dorothea looked at him as if he had spoken a foreign language in his own house. Rosamund pressed the linen harder against her wrist, though the burn no longer required it. If she let go, her hand might tremble. You speak beautifully for a man who has not had to consider the cost of shelter, Lady Dorothea said. I am considering it now, because Miss Ellery has encouraged you to see insult where none was meant. Miss Ellery has answered questions more plainly than anyone else in this room. That should have comforted Rosamund. Instead, it placed her in danger. Lady Dorothea's gaze returned to her, soft and terrible. Then let Miss Ellery answer one more. Did I command you to act as a servant? The old trap opened. If Rosamund said yes, Lady Dorothea would deny command. If she said no, the whole room would turn humiliation into misunderstanding. She drew one careful breath. You told Mrs. Hodge I was to make myself useful. Mrs. Hodge gave me a tray with a sealed order. The seal made refusal seem insolent. Mrs. Dane then asked me to pour tea and stand while she ate. Whether you commanded every step or only prepared the stairs, I cannot say. Silence followed. It was not a complete victory. It was more dangerous than that. It was precise. The Duke looked at her for a moment, and Rosamund understood that he had heard the restraint as much as the accusation. Lady Dorothea's mouth hardened. Very clever. No, my lady, Rosamund said. Only careful. Mr. Bellamy opened the key register at the Duke's nod. Your Grace, the key to the late Duchess's writing desk and the key to the press in the Blue Bedchamber are both registered under Lady Dorothea's authority. For safekeeping, Lady Dorothea snapped. Family items require supervision. And the old seal? The Duke asked. Mr. Bellamy turned a page. Kept in the late Duchess's writing desk, Your Grace. The room seemed to narrow around the answer. Rosamund looked at the folded order on the salver, and saw again the blurred black wax, the wrong hand, the authority borrowed from a dead woman's desk. The Duke took the page from Mr. Bellamy and held it without looking away from Lady Dorothea. Who else has used that desk? I cannot possibly account for every servant with a duster. You will not put this on a maid. The words came fast enough to reveal anger, then slowed as he mastered it. Not without proof. Not because she is easier to sacrifice than family. Lady Dorothea went very still. Mrs. Hodge swallowed. Rosamund thought of Pippa behind the linen shelves, and felt the burn in her wrist become smaller than the ache behind her ribs. Someone had meant for a weaker woman to carry the first burden. If Rosamund had refused, Pippa might have stood in that bedchamber instead. Your Grace, she said, there should be a chaperone. The Duke turned. For you? For the house, Mrs. Dane is under your roof. I am under Lady Dorothea's protection, though that protection now appears complicated. If questions continue without another lady present, they will become another story by luncheon. Lady Dorothea's eyes flashed. You presume to direct propriety? No, my lady. I am trying to survive it. The Duke's face changed, not softly, but deeply. He looked toward Mr. Bellamy. Send a note to Lady Marian Whitby. My carriage will bring her if she is at home. Tell her the matter concerns Miss Ellery's protection and the honor of this house." Lady Dorothea laughed once, without warmth. "Marian Whitby? That severe widow will scent scandal before she removes her bonnet. Then we had better give her truth to scent with it." The Duke turned to Mrs. Hodge. "Until Lady Marian arrives, Miss Ellery is to be treated as a gentlewoman guest. She is not to be summoned, corrected, questioned, or moved without my knowledge. Yes, Your Grace, Lady Dorothea," he continued. "You will not speak with Miss Ellery alone." Lady Dorothea's pride rose visibly. "In my nephew's house, I am now forbidden conversation with my own companion. In my house, no one owns another person by calling her companion." Rosamund looked down because the force of relief was too intimate to show. She had not been freed. Not yet. The order remained forged, the seal unexplained. Lavinia still wore innocence like silk, and Lady Dorothea still held keys to rooms where dead women's things had been disturbed. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, shelter and dignity had appeared in the same room and had not been made enemies. Mr. Bellamy gathered the order book and key register. The Duke lifted the folded order once more, studying the black wax. "This began with a tray," he said. "It will not end there." Rosamund looked toward the linen-covered silver on the side table. Beneath the cloth, the old tray waited. It had carried breakfast, insult, and a forged command. Now it carried a question no one in Calderwick House wished to answer. Who had opened the late Duchess' desk, and what else had they taken from it? Lady Marian Whitby arrived before noon with the expression of a woman who had been summoned from a quiet breakfast, and found civilization behaving exactly as badly as she had always suspected. Her carriage stopped at the front of Calderwick House rather than the servants' entrance, and she stepped down in a dark bonnet, grey gloves, and a travelling cloak cut with such severe elegance that even the footman seemed to stand straighter for having opened the door. She did not hurry. Hurrying gave scandal too much satisfaction. By the time Mr. Bellamy brought her into the morning room, Rosamund had changed the linen on her wrist twice. The folded order had been locked in the Duke's desk, and Lady Dorothea had withdrawn with the stiff dignity of a woman who intended to return better armed. Sebastian stood by the mantel. Rosamund remained seated near the window because he had told her she was to rest, and because disobeying kindness felt ungracious even when kindness was still unfamiliar. Lady Marian looked first at Rosamund, then at the Duke, then at the covered silver tray on the side table. "Sebastian," she said, "you rarely write before luncheon unless a roof has fallen in or a relative has done something unforgivable. I see the roof is intact." The Duke inclined his head. "Lady Marian?" "Miss Ellery, I presume." Rosamund rose. Lady Marian waved her down at once. "Don't stand because I entered. If half of what Sebastian's note suggests is true, enough people have made theatre of your posture this morning." Rosamund sat again, not because the widow's tone was soft, but because it left no room for performance. Lady Marian took the chair opposite her. "Show me your wrist." Rosamund extended her hand. The burn had faded from fierce red to a tender mark, though the skin still pulled when she moved. Lady Marian examined it with practical sympathy. Small, real. Those two facts often trouble a household equally. The Duke gave a brief account, precise and stripped of ornament. He spoke of the tray, the forged order, the blue bedchamber, the shawl, the old seal, the key register, and Lady Dorothea's authority over his mother's desk. He did not describe Lavinia's tone. He did not need to. Rosamund watched Lady Marian understand the missing cruelties by the spaces he left around them. "And Mrs. Dane remains in the blue bedchamber?" Lady Marian asked. "For the moment, wearing the late Duchess's shawl. Not now. I instructed her to remove it." Lady Marian's mouth flattened. One hopes she survived the deprivation. She turned to Rosamund. "You may come to Brook Street with me this afternoon. My house is respectable, dull, and defended by a cook who frightens callers into honesty. You would be beyond immediate insult there." The offer was sensible. It was also tempting enough to hurt. Rosamund imagined a quiet guest room, a door that did not open to Mrs. Hodge's orders, a stair no one expected her to descend by the back way. She imagined placing her burned wrist under cool water without wondering whether she was being dramatic. Then she imagined the story in Calderwick House after she left. Miss Ellery had become overwrought. Miss Ellery had misunderstood. Miss Ellery had been removed for her own comfort. By tomorrow, comfort would become confession. "Thank you," she said, "but I cannot leave today." Sebastian looked at her then. Miss Ellery. She heard the warning in his voice, not against her, but against danger. "Your Grace, if I leave now, others will decide why I left. Lady Dorothea will say I was ashamed, Mrs. Dane will say I was delicate. Mrs. Hodge will say servants misunderstood. By nightfall, my absence will have done more work against me than any accusation spoken aloud." Lady Marian leaned back, studying her, a clear mind under pressure. "How inconvenient for your enemies." "I am not seeking enemies. No, my dear. That is why you are especially vulnerable to people who collect them for sport." Sebastian moved from the mantel. "There may be risks in remaining. There are risks in being sent away while the lie is still in the house." Rosamund held her hands together so tightly that her burned wrist protested. She loosened her grip. "I have lived under Lady Dorothea's protection for 3 years. I know what gratitude can be made to sound like when repeated by the person who feeds you. If I go, she will speak as my benefactress. I will become a girl too proud to accept kindness and too poor to reject it." The Duke's face changed, not visibly enough for most, but she saw it. A shadow of anger, yes, but also shame. Not personal shame, house shame. He was beginning to understand that Calderwick House had not simply hosted one morning's cruelty. It had provided the rooms, servants, customs, and silence that made it easy. "Then Lady Marian remains here," he said. Lady Marian lifted one brow. "Do I? If you are willing. I am nearly 50, wealthy enough to offend people, and widowed long enough to have no fear of bored men. Of course I am willing." She looked at Rosamund. "But only if Miss Ellery consents. I am not another lock placed upon her for her own good." That sentence moved through Rosamund with unexpected force. Another lock. How many had there been? Shelter. Gratitude. Reputation, proper behavior. A woman could be caged by velvet if the door closed softly enough. "I consent," Rosamund said. "Good. Then I shall take the room beside yours." Sebastian answered before Rosamund could explain the narrow chamber near the servants' stair. "Miss Ellery will not return to that room." Rosamund looked up. "Your Grace, my things are there. They will be moved. That may cause comment." "The house has earned comment." Lady Marian's eyes gleamed. "Excellent. I begin to hope this day may improve, Mr." Bellamy entered with a note from the key register copied in his own hand. "Your Grace, as requested." The Blue Bedchamber press, the late Duchess's writing desk, and the old seal box are all under Lady Dorothea's recorded authority. The silver cabinet key is kept by me, but access was requested yesterday under family instruction. "By whom?" "Mrs. Hodge, Your Grace." She said. Lady Dorothea wished to review pieces for the charity breakfast. Sebastian's gaze went to the covered tray. "And no entry was made for removal?" "No, Your Grace." The butler's voice carried pain. A good servant's pride was order, and order had been used behind his back. "The tray is to be placed in my study," Sebastian said, "untouched except by you. Lock the room afterward." "Yes, Your Grace." Rosamund watched the tray leave beneath its linen covering. It should have been relief to see it gone. Instead, she felt the strange pull of an object that had become witness. Once it left the room, the silence around her seemed less protected. Lady Marian noticed. Objects used for cruelty acquire a voice. Unfortunately, they seldom speak until properly questioned. Sebastian looked at her. "Then we shall question it." Before anyone could answer, a soft knock came at the door. Pippa entered with fresh linen and a small jar of ointment. She curtsied so quickly she nearly dropped both. "For Miss Ellery, Your Grace." Rosamund saw the girl's fear and understood that kindness from high people could feel as dangerous as anger. She took the linen herself. "Thank you, Pippa. You have been very careful." The girl looked at her as if praise were a language she knew only from overhearing it in other rooms. Yes, Mrs. Hodge appeared behind her, in the passage watching. Rosamund felt the old instinct to say nothing. Then she remembered the tray. Pippa, she said gently, you are not at fault for this morning. Pippa's eyes widened. No, miss. Mrs. Hodge's face tightened. Sebastian turned toward the housekeeper. Is there some correction you wish to make? No, your grace. Then leave the girl to her duties without frightening her into someone else's confession. The words struck cleanly. Pippa dropped another curtsy and vanished before gratitude could endanger her. After luncheon was refused by everyone except Lady Marian, who declared morality required sandwiches, Rosamund was shown to a guest room overlooking the rear garden. It was modest by Calderwick standards and impossibly grand by hers. A proper bed, a clean writing desk, curtains without mildew at the hem, a bell pull she did not intend to touch. Her trunk arrived carried by 2 footmen who addressed her as Miss Ellery, while Mrs. Hodge stood near the landing, looking as if each syllable offended household history. Rosamund thanked them evenly. When the door closed, she allowed herself one breath, then another. The room did not heal her. It only proved she could be moved upward in a house without stealing anything from anyone. That, by itself, was enough to make her sit on the edge of the bed until her eyes stopped burning. Near late afternoon, she went with Lady Marian to the small gallery that overlooked the main stair. Sebastian had gone to his study with Mr. Bellamy. Lady Dorothea had not reappeared. Calderwick House seemed to be waiting for its next falsehood to choose a costume. It came in pale blue silk. Lavinia Dane emerged from the corridor below with a lace handkerchief in one hand and composure in the other. The Duchess's shawl was gone. In its place, a narrow silver key hung from a ribbon at her waist, bright against the blue. Rosamund saw it and stopped. Lavinia saw that she had seen it. Miss Ellery, Lavinia called softly from the stair. How well you rise in a house after one small injury. Lady Marian's hand rested lightly on the rail. Mrs. Dane, if that was meant as wit, I advise burial before dinner. Lavinia smiled up at her. Lady Marian, what comfort to have you here. Miss Ellery must be so relieved to have a champion. Rosamund looked at the key. Does that open the late Duchess's press? Lavinia's hand covered it too quickly. That was the answer before words arrived. A trinket. Widows are allowed sentimental things. Whose sentiment? Lavinia's eyes cooled. Be careful, Miss Ellery. London loves a proud poor girl for exactly one afternoon. After that, it enjoys teaching her proportion. Rosamund felt Lady Marian beside her, felt the vast house around her, felt the old pressure. To step back before a woman with better gowns and sharper allies. She did not step back. Then London must learn a better story. Lavinia's smile returned, slow and unpleasant. Stories are planted, my dear. She passed below them and disappeared toward the drawing room. The scent of violets lingered up the stair. 10 minutes later, Mr. Bellamy brought a calling card to Lady Marian on a silver salver. The card was edged in cream and written in a bold, fashionable hand. Lady Wrexham. Across the back, someone had added one line. Is Miss Ellery still in residence? Lady Marian read it once and handed it to Rosamund. Sebastian appeared at the study door at the same moment, as if the house had summoned him with its unease. Rosamund held the card between 2 fingers and understood that Lavinia had been right about one thing. Stories were planted. This one had already left the house. By 6 o'clock, Calderwick House had arranged itself to look innocent. Fires were lit, flowers were moved into better vases, the dining room silver was counted twice, and Lady Dorothea sent word that dinner would proceed as planned, because nothing made scandal hungrier than an empty table. Rosamund understood the message beneath the message. If she stayed away, she was ashamed. If she attended, she could be displayed, diminished, and measured against women who had never had to earn a place near candlelight. Lady Marian stood in Rosamund's new chamber, while Pippa fastened the back of a dove-brown gown that had once belonged to Lady Dorothea, and had been altered badly enough to remind its wearer of dependence. It will do, Lady Marian said. which from her sounded close to praise. Pippa smoothed the sleeve with anxious fingers. "There's a little pull at the shoulder, miss." "Then I shall not wave a flag," Rosamund said. Pippa's lips parted in surprise, then nearly smiled. Lady Marian watched the tiny exchange and said nothing until the maid had gone. "They will try to make you either grateful or insolent tonight. Both are cages." Rosamund looked at herself in the glass. The burn on her wrist had darkened to a narrow red line, visible whenever her cuff shifted. What is left between them? Truth, if spoken sparingly. The dinner bell sounded below, polished and merciless. In the dining room, the guests had already begun the delicate sport of pretending not to know why they had accepted Lady Dorothea's sudden invitation. Lady Wrexham stood near the mantel, tall, jewelled and sharp-eyed, her earlier calling card now disguised behind gracious curiosity. Sir Alistair Pembroke and his wife had come because the Seamen's Widows' Relief Committee gave respectability to any evening, however poisonous. A visiting curate hovered near the sideboard, uncertain whether he had entered a charitable dinner or a family weather system. Lavinia Dane arrived last in pearl grey silk, her mourning softened into beauty, her eyes bright with the confidence of a woman who had never expected truth to be invited to table. The Duke entered with Lady Marian. Rosamund followed half a pace behind, not hidden, not presented, simply present. That alone made Lady Dorothea's smile thin. "Miss Ellery," Lady Wrexham said, extending a hand with more interest than warmth. "You remain with us after all." "Yes, Lady Wrexham. How steady of you. I have had practice." The older lady's brows lifted. A lesser hostess might have changed the subject. Lady Dorothea only smiled more brightly. "Come, we must not make Miss Ellery self-conscious. She has endured enough attention for one day." The seating had been arranged with surgical courtesy. Lady Marian was placed near the Duke, as rank required. Lavinia sat within easy speaking distance of him, as if habit had already claimed intimacy. Rosamund found her name card low at the table near the curate, below Lady Pembroke and far enough from the Duke that any rescue would require a visible breach. She saw the insult. She also saw Sebastian see it. His hand touched the back of his chair, then stopped. Across the table, Rosamund let her fingers rest lightly beside her plate and gave the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. If he corrected every slight before it spoke, the room would say she survived only by his intervention. He understood. The knowledge passed between them in a silence no one else had been meant to overhear. Dinner began with soup, white fish and polite references to the rain that had not fallen. Lavinia waited until the first course had settled the room into performance. "I am so grateful for Lady Dorothea's calm tonight," she said. A lesser household might have allowed a little confusion to become dramatic. Lady Wrexham's gaze sharpened. "Confusion does have a way of enlarging itself in Mayfair, only when fed," Lavinia said. Her eyes drifted toward Rosamund. "Some women have the grace to serve where they cannot belong. Others prefer to make service sound like injury." The curate looked into his wineglass as if doctrine might be found there. Lady Pembroke's fork paused. Rosamund felt the old heat rise beneath her collar, but she let it cool before it reached her face. "Usefulness freely offered is a virtue, Mrs. Dane. Usefulness demanded for display becomes something poorer." Lady Dorothea gave a small laugh. "How finely Miss Ellery defines the world. One would never guess she has had the benefit of practical charity." "Practical charity," Lady Marian said, "should never require a woman to surrender the meaning of words." Lavinia tilted her head. "You are severe, Lady Marian, only with nonsense. It wilts if neglected." A faint, unwilling smile crossed Lady Wrexham's mouth. The Duke had not yet spoken. Rosamund felt the table waiting for him to either rebuke her or claim her answer as his own. He did neither. He allowed her words to stand. That restraint required more strength than interruption, and for the first time that day, Rosamund wondered what it cost him. Lady Dorothea redirected the conversation with a hostess's practiced hand. "Sir Alistair, you will be pleased to know the Widows' Relief Committee continues to organize distribution with great care. Miss Ellery has often assisted with copying lists. Only copying? The Duke asked. The question altered the table at once. Lady Dorothea's eyes flickered. Naturally. Accounts are tedious work. Miss Ellery, Sebastian said, you reviewed the committee figures last winter, did you not? Rosamund looked at him. He had not warned her. He had given her an opening and left the choice inside it. I copied them, Your Grace, and noticed an irregularity. Lavinia smiled. How extraordinary. A breakfast tray at dawn and accounts by dinner. Miss Ellery is becoming indispensable. Rosamund met her gaze. No, Mrs. Dane. Merely difficult to misplace. Lady Wrexham made a small sound that might have been a cough or delight. The Duke turned his wineglass once without drinking. What irregularity did you notice? Rosamund felt every eye return to her, but this attention was different from Lavinia's bedchamber gaze. It did not make her an ornament of humiliation. It asked whether she had a mind. 3 pledges were entered as received, but 2 widows were moved from regular relief to occasional relief in the same month. The totals balanced only because a promised sum was treated as paid before it reached the treasurer. Sir Alistair leaned forward. That is not a small oversight. No, Rosamund said. But it is a quiet one. Lady Dorothea's fan opened with a snap. Committees often deal in pledges. Gentlemen delay payment. Nothing sinister should be dragged from arithmetic. I suggested at the time that receipts be signed by 2 members, Rosamund said, and that widows receiving reduced relief be named clearly. Not placed under a general heading. Lady Pembroke looked troubled. That seems reasonable. Lavinia's smile thinned. Reasonable, perhaps, but not very trusting. Rosamund lowered her voice. Trust is most useful when it protects those without the power to demand proof. The table stilled. The words had left the charity ledger and entered the room where she had been seated. The Duke looked at her then, and whatever moved behind his eyes was not admiration alone. It was recognition, and it felt more dangerous than kindness. Lady Wrexham set down her spoon. How interesting. I received a note last month, under His Grace's name, asking that disbursements be delayed until he returned to London. I thought it unusually cautious, but not impossible. The Duke's expression changed so swiftly that the candlelight seemed to sharpen. Under my name, yes, I wrote no such note. Lady Wrexham went very still. Lady Dorothea's fan stopped. Lavinia lifted her glass but did not drink. Rosamund heard the room understand what it did not yet want to say. The forged breakfast order was not alone. Someone had used the Duke's name beyond the servants' passage, beyond the Blue Bedchamber, beyond Rosamund's humiliation. The lie had travelled through charity, money, and society. Do you still have it? Sebastian asked. Lady Wrexham looked at him over her diamonds. I am vain, Your Grace, but not careless. I keep correspondence that alters committee business. Will you send? Tomorrow morning. I shall send it tonight if my footman can be made useful without being dramatic. Lady Marian looked pleased. An excellent standard for men generally. The curate coughed for real this time. Lavinia set down her glass. Surely we are not turning a dinner table into an inquiry. Poor Miss Ellery will think herself important enough to cause a government collapse. Accuracy is not importance, Rosamund said. It is simply harder to bully. Lavinia's face altered, not enough for accusation, enough for Rosamund to know she had struck something living. Lady Dorothea rose with sudden hostess grace. We shall withdraw. Gentlemen may discuss their ledgers without terrifying the ladies. No, Lady Wrexham said, rising more slowly. I find terror improves a dull evening. The ladies moved to the drawing room, where tea was set, beneath the watchful eyes of portraits that had survived generations of better scandals. Lady Dorothea drew Rosamund aside near the pianoforte, smiling as if offering counsel. You have been fortunate today. Do not confuse fortune with strength. Rosamund kept her voice low. I have confused silence with safety before. I shall not do it again. Cleverness does not protect poor women, neither has obedience. Lady Dorothea's smile vanished. You forget yourself. No, my lady, that is what has changed. Across the room, Lavinia was speaking to Lady Wrexham with soft distress, already trying to wrap the evening in another version. Lady Marian intercepted her with the calm of a general moving artillery. Rosamund looked toward the closed dining room door. Beyond it, the Duke was likely asking Sir Alistair how a forged note under his name had touched widows' funds. For the first time, the scandal seemed larger than her own shame. That should have made it colder. Instead, it gave her purpose. A servant entered with a card on a salver for Lady Dorothea. The older woman read it, and for one brief, unguarded instant, fear crossed her face. Then she folded the card and slid it into her sleeve. Rosamund saw only 2 words before it disappeared. I, Fane. The name meant nothing yet. Lady Dorothea's hand on the card said it would. The second lie arrived in Calderwick House, before the breakfast plates had been cleared, folded in Lady Wrexham's bold hand and delivered by a footman who looked relieved to leave it behind. Mr. Bellamy carried it to the Duke's study on a salver, without disguising the gravity of the errand. Rosamund stood beside Lady Marian near the window, her burned wrist hidden beneath a clean cup, while Sebastian broke the seal and unfolded the note Lady Wrexham had enclosed. No one spoke as he read. Morning light fell across the desk, the household order book, the key register, and the linen-wrapped tray that had been brought from the locked cabinet under Mr. Bellamy's watch. The room seemed less like a study than a place where polite falsehoods had been summoned and made to stand in line. It is not mine, Sebastian said at last. His voice held no surprise, only a colder certainty. Lady Marian took the note from him and read aloud. By His Grace's instruction, disbursements to the Seamen's Widows' Relief Committee are to be delayed pending further review. She lowered the paper. How convenient. Widows can always wait, apparently. Their hunger is so well bred. Rosamund looked at the writing. The hand was more polished than the breakfast order, but it had the same vanity in its angles, the same pressure where a lighter touch would have looked more natural. May I see both together? She asked. Sebastian placed the forged breakfast order beside Lady Wrexham's note. He did not push them toward her, as if granting permission to a curiosity. He made space on the desk as if the space belonged to her examination. That small difference warmed her and frightened her at once. Rosamund bent over the papers. This note is better practiced. The writer expected a lady to read it closely. The breakfast order was meant for servants and speed. But, Lady Marian asked, but the capital C in Calderwick begins too wide. His Grace does not do that. Rosamund paused, suddenly conscious of having spoken with too much certainty about a man's hand in front of him. Forgive me, Your Grace. For accuracy? No, Sebastian's gaze remained on the papers. Continue. The word should have sounded like command. It did not. It sounded like trust placed carefully between them. Rosamund pointed without touching. Here, the final stroke in veil drags below the line, the same in the breakfast order. It is an imitation by someone who has seen your writing, but not enough of it to forget they are imitating. Lady Marian's eyes sharpened. Or someone has copied from one model repeatedly, Mr. Bellamy opened a small packet. Your Grace, I retrieved 2 household memoranda bearing your true hand from last spring. As requested, Sebastian looked at Rosamund. Compare them. Lavinia would have made the request sound like employment. Lady Dorothea would have made it sound like repayment. The Duke made it sound like evidence required the best eyes in the room, and for one dangerous moment, Rosamund wanted to be foolishly grateful. She resisted it. Gratitude could be clean only if it was not demanded. She examined the genuine notes. The distinction was clear. His hand was severe, compressed, without ornamental hesitation. The false hand tried to look severe and became theatrical. The forged notes are cousins, not twins, she said. The same vanity shaped both. Lady Marian gave a dry nod. A useful family resemblance. The door opened after a knock, and Mrs. Hodge entered with Pippa behind her. The young maid's face had gone white. In her hands, she carried a folded dustcloth, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Lady Dorothea followed without waiting to be invited, wearing a morning gown of dark green and an expression of charitable concern. I am told we are now examining servants, she said. Since the household has become a magistrate's office, I thought I should attend. Sebastian did not offer her a chair. You were not summoned, no, but Mrs. Hodge has discovered something troubling. I would hate the poor girl to be questioned without support. Pippa looked as if that support might smother her. Mrs. Hodge stepped forward. Your Grace, Pippa was near the family corridor yesterday morning. She may have seen the tray brought down. She may also have touched papers left below stairs. Rosamund felt the movement before it happened, the old downward slide of blame. It began politely, always politely. A maid near a corridor. A girl near papers. Poverty close enough to wrongdoing to make imagination do the rest. Pippa was black-leading the schoolroom grate yesterday before breakfast, Rosamund said. Every face turned toward her. She kept her voice calm. I saw the smudge on her sleeve when Mrs. Hodge handed me the tray. The schoolroom is 2 flights from the Blue Bedchamber, and nowhere near the late Duchess's desk. Mrs. Hodge stiffened. She might have gone later. Later, the tray had already been in my hands, and the order already sealed. Rosamund looked to Pippa. Did you touch any note below stairs? Pippa shook her head quickly. I wouldn't. Mrs. Hodge said if I was asked, I was to remember I'd been near the table, but I wasn't. Not near enough, I swear it. Mrs. Hodge's face darkened. Mind your words, girl. Sebastian's voice cut through the room. Mrs. Hodge. The housekeeper froze. You will not correct a frightened servant into silence while I am asking for truth. Pippa's eyes filled, but she did not cry. That restraint broke Rosamund's heart more than tears would have done. The girl had already learned that tears could be used against her. Lady Dorothea sighed. Sebastian, surely you see how easily dependents protect each other. Miss Ellery is kind, admirably so. But kindness can cloud judgment. Rosamund turned to her. No, my lady. Fear clouds judgment. Kindness often clears it because the frightened person can finally speak. The words surprised even her. Lady Marian's mouth softened. Sebastian looked at Pippa, not as a duke looked at a maid, but as a man looked at a witness who had nearly been erased before she began. You are not dismissed, he said. You are not accused. You will return to your duties under Mr. Bellamy's direction, not Mrs. Hodge's, until I decide otherwise. Pippa curtsied so low she nearly lost the cloth. Thank you, Your Grace. Thank Miss Ellery for remembering where you were. The girl looked at Rosamund then, and in her face was something rawer than gratitude. It was disbelief that someone above her had chosen not to be safe at her expense. After Pippa withdrew, Mr. Bellamy laid the household ledger open on the desk. Your Grace, I examined the accounts. Lady Dorothea asked me to pull from last quarter. Lady Dorothea's fingers tightened over her gloves. I had no idea my requests were now suspicious. Your timing has made them so, Sebastian said. Mr. Bellamy turned the book toward the Duke. 3 payments are entered as London roof repairs. The total is £400. No tradesman's receipt is attached. The payments are split across different weeks. Rosamund stood very still. £400 was not a household oversight. It was a sum large enough to require intention. She looked at the notation. Near the margin, written faintly in pencil and nearly rubbed away, were 2 initials. I.F. The same beginning she had seen on the card. Lady Dorothea had slid into her sleeve. I feign, she said. Lady Dorothea's head came up sharply. Those initials could mean any number of things. Yes, Rosamund said, but your hand knew the card last night before your face did. Silence followed. Lady Marian looked from Rosamund to Lady Dorothea with new interest. Sebastian's gaze had sharpened. What card? Rosamund felt the danger of speaking now, but the greater danger lay in allowing fear to make her vague. A card was delivered to Lady Dorothea after dinner. I saw only 2 words before she put it away. Lady Dorothea laughed with brittle grace. My brother writes to me, that is hardly treason. No one said treason, Sebastian replied. You did hear debt. Her colour changed. Only slightly. Enough, Lady Marian's voice was quiet. Lord Ivo has been unlucky at cards for years. Unlucky men often become imaginative with other people's accounts. Marian, Lady Dorothea snapped. Don't dress malice as wisdom. I never need to dress malice. It has an excellent wardrobe of its own. Sebastian closed the ledger halfway, then stopped. His attention moved to the linen-wrapped tray. Uncover it. Mr. Bellamy did so with careful hands. The silver emerged into light, bright, and old, and strangely defenseless. Sebastian turned it slightly until the underside of the handle faced the desk lamp. Miss Ellery noticed the engraving yesterday. B. Vale, Brackenley. His voice altered for the first time, not breaking but deepening. My mother used it at breakfast when I was a child. Rosamund lowered her eyes. That admission had not been meant for her alone, but it reached her as if it had crossed a private distance. This tray had not been chosen only because it was valuable. It had been chosen because it could wound him too. Your Grace, she said softly. May I look beneath the handle? He stepped aside at once. She did not touch the silver at first. She leaned close enough to see where old polishing had failed to smooth a scratch near the base of the handle. Something dark clung there, not tarnish, not shadow. Black wax, Mr. Bellamy drew in a breath. Sebastian bent nearer. Their shoulders did not touch, yet Rosamund felt the nearness as sharply as if it had. She kept her voice steady. The seal touched the tray. Not by accident after service. Wax has caught inside the scratch. The order and the tray were together before the tray came to me. Lady Dorothea said nothing. Mrs. Hodge had gone grey. Lady Marian's face hardened into satisfaction without joy. Sebastian straightened slowly. The tray touched the lie before Miss Ellery ever carried it. He looked toward the door through which Pippa had gone. And someone meant a woman without power to carry the blame for it. Rosamund looked at the smear of wax beneath the handle. It was small, almost invisible, yet the whole house had shifted around it. The silver had carried breakfast, insult, memory, and now proof. Somewhere inside Calderwick House was the hand that had pressed the old seal into black wax, ordered a poor gentlewoman into humiliation, and moved money under a noble name. Rosamund felt fear, but beneath it was something steadier. The lie had begun to show its seams. By the next morning, Calderwick House had learned to whisper without moving its lips. Rosamund felt it. As soon as she entered the blue drawing room beside Lady Marian, where Lady Dorothea had arranged the Seamen's Widows' Relief Committee breakfast, as if scandal could be served with rolls, marmalade, and excellent coffee. The room had been made bright on purpose. Sunlight struck gilt mirrors, white cloths, and polished cups. Flowers stood in disciplined bowls along the sideboard. Every chair had been placed to flatter rank, not comfort. The silver tray from Brackenley was not there. It remained locked in the Duke's study, with the black wax under its handle. But its absence seemed to occupy the center of the room more powerfully than any object could have done. Lady Wrexham had come, of course. So had Lady Pembroke, two committee patrons, Mrs. Vale's old acquaintance, Lady Merton, and a pair of younger married ladies, who had clearly been told that charity was the excuse and gossip the reward. They greeted Lady Marian properly. They greeted Rosamund with the special caution reserved for women who might be either victim or trouble, depending on which version proved fashionable by luncheon. Lavinia Dane stood near the tea table in pale green muslin, a black ribbon at her throat. Her expression softened into pained composure. She looked like a woman forgiving the world for noticing her. Lady Dorothea moved among the guests with a hostess's smooth command, pausing only long enough to give Rosamund a glance that said the battlefield had changed. Miss Ellery, Lady Wrexham said, extending two fingers. You are looking well after yesterday's disturbance. Thank you, Lady Wrexham. That is wise. Disturbances improve only when one refuses to look injured by them. Lady Marian's eyes narrowed. Or when one refuses to injure people for sport. There are several methods. Lady Wrexham smiled. Lady Marian, you are wasted in polite society, not entirely. I keep it nervous. Rosamund should have smiled. She did not. Across the room, the Duke entered with Mr. Bellamy, half a pace behind him. Sebastian wore dark mourning dress and the expression of a man who had not slept long enough to forgive anyone. His eyes found Rosamund first, then moved over the room, counting exits, alliances, and dangers no one else had named. He did not come directly to her. That was proper. It was also difficult. Since yesterday, his protection had stood between her and insult so often that its distance now felt like exposed skin. Lady Dorothea saw the distance and took it for permission. Breakfast began. Cups passed. Plates were filled. Ladies spoke of widows in the careful manner of people who wanted credit for compassion, without hearing too much about hunger. Rosamund sat near Lady Marian, her hands folded, the burn on her wrist hidden beneath lace. She could feel Lavinia watching her between compliments. At last Lady Dorothea rose, with a folded paper in hand. "My dear friends, before we speak of disbursements, I must thank you for attending despite the regrettable confusion that has lately visited this house." A gentle murmur answered her. "Confusion," Lady Dorothea continued, "is sometimes enlarged by tender nerves. I should hate for a private household misunderstanding to distract from the noble women we are gathered to assist." Lavinia lowered her eyes. "Dear Lady Dorothea, you are too generous. I should have insisted at once that no one trouble Miss Ellery. She was so eager to oblige that I failed to see she might later feel wounded by what she offered. There it was. Not accusation, worse. Revision. A few guests shifted. One younger lady looked quickly at Rosamund, then away. Rosamund felt heat climb her throat. She had known Lavinia would try to reshape the morning, but knowledge did not make the shaping painless. Lavinia's voice remained tender. A bedchamber breakfast, a lady wishing for company, a tray carried by willing hands. In a calmer light, it might have passed unnoticed. Yet reduced circumstances can make ordinary kindness feel like command, can't they? The words settled like ash. Rosamund looked toward the Duke. He stood near the mantel, motionless, eyes on Lavinia. He did not speak. 1 second passed, then another. She understood why, perhaps. He had evidence not yet complete. He was measuring the room, choosing the moment, refusing to expose a half-built truth before the women who would tear it apart. But society did not read silence as strategy. It read it as permission. Rosamund had spent years learning that. The hurt of it came with terrible precision, because he was the first man in that house who had seen her. In the corridor, in the morning room, in the study, he had looked at her, as if she were a person inside the insult. Now, while everyone waited to be told what she was, he allowed the silence to lengthen. Perhaps only a few seconds passed. It was long enough for loneliness to recognize an old room. Lavinia turned to her with eyes full of false pity. "Miss Ellery, you did carry the tray, did you not?" Lady Marian's hand moved faintly on the arm of her chair, a warning or support. Rosamund rose before she could decide which. The room tightened. "Yes, Mrs. Dane," she said. "I carried what I was ordered to carry." Lavinia's smile flickered. "Ordered?" Such a severe word. "It is an accurate one." "By whom?" Lady Dorothea asked, smooth as a blade. A written instruction under the Calderwick seal was given below stairs. "Mrs. Hodge put the tray into my hands. I believed refusal would be treated as insolence, or the task would fall to a maid with less protection than I had." A silence followed that was not comfortable for anyone. Rosamund continued because stoppings now would return the room to Lavinia. "When I entered the Blue Bedchamber, Mrs. Dane asked me to pour tea. Then she asked me to stand while she ate." Lavinia laughed softly. "You make companionship sound like punishment." "No. You did that." The words came out calm, and because they were calm, they struck harder. Lady Dorothea's fan opened. "Miss Ellery, you forget yourself." Rosamund turned toward her. "No, my lady." "That is what makes this uncomfortable." Lady Wrexham leaned forward, all amusement gone. Lavinia's eyes sharpened. "This is pride speaking. Perhaps. Pride is what remains when a woman has been stripped of easier defenses. I did not make you poor. No." Rosamund felt her pulse in her wrist, in her throat, in every place fear had tried to govern. "But you used poverty as proof that I deserved what was done. I will not allow that." The room drew in. She heard the clock by the window mark a single second. "I carried your tray, Mrs. Dane." "I will not carry your shame." No one moved. Then the Duke spoke. "Mrs. Dane." The name was not loud. It stopped her as surely as a hand on a door. Lavinia turned toward him with quick, injured grace. Your Grace, I am astonished you permit this attack. I heard no attack. He stepped away from the mantel. I heard a woman describe what others have tried to soften into confusion. You judge me by her performance? Not yet. The two words chilled the room. Lavinia's mouth closed. Lady Dorothea stood. This has gone far enough. It has not gone nearly far enough, Sebastian said. But it will wait until every fact has a witness. Rosamund should have felt vindicated. Instead, the small wound of his earlier silence remained. He had spoken now. Yes, he had spoken strongly. Yet, there had been a moment when she had stood alone inside a room that was already deciding what to do with her. That moment could not be untaken. Lady Wrexham rose with unusual restraint. Perhaps the committee should adjourn until correspondence and accounts have been reviewed. A charitable thought, Lady Marian said. Those are rare enough to reward. Chairs shifted. Breakfast ended without anyone admitting it had failed. The guests left in clusters, carrying fragments of the scandal behind polite faces. Some glanced at Rosamund with reluctant respect. Others looked at Lavinia with doubt sharpened by curiosity. Lady Dorothea gave instructions to servants with unnecessary precision, reclaiming control in small domestic movements. When the room had emptied, Sebastian crossed toward Rosamund, but he stopped before coming too near. Miss Ellery. She looked at him. Your Grace, I should have spoken sooner. The admission came without defense. That made it harder to reject. Yes, she said. His face tightened. I was weighing what could be proved. I did not wish to let them turn evidence into noise before we had enough. It became noise while you were weighing it. Lady Marian looked toward the window, granting them privacy by the width of a room. Sebastian accepted the rebuke. I know, Rosamund's voice lowered. I do not need a perfect rescue, Your Grace. I need not to be left alone in the moment everyone decides what I am. Something moved across his face, not coldness now, but pain governed by discipline. You will not be left alone again. She wanted to believe him. That frightened her almost as much as the accusation had. Wanting belief from a powerful man was dangerous. Wanting anything was dangerous when one's life had taught her that hope often came with a bill attached. Before she could answer, Mr. Bellamy appeared at the drawing-room door, his composure strained. Your Grace. Sebastian turned. What is it? The study has been checked as you ordered. The butler's gaze moved once to Rosamund, then back. The Brackenlay tray is gone. The room altered. Lady Marian rose. Lavinia, still near the tea table, lowered her cup with infinite care. Lady Dorothea's face went still before concern had time to arrive. Sebastian's voice became very quiet. Gone? Yes, Your Grace. The linen remains. The tray does not. Rosamund looked toward the empty table where society breakfast had just been cleared away. First the tray had made her servant. Then scandal. Now absence had made it a weapon again. Somewhere in Calderwick House, the silver had vanished, and the next story was already being prepared. The missing tray did not create chaos. It created opportunity, and Rosamund saw at once who recognized it. Lady Dorothea's eyes moved first to the study corridor, then to Rosamund's face, and only after that did she remember to look concerned. Lavinia Dane remained by the tea table, with her cup balanced in both hands, pale lashes lowered, her composure too delicate to be believed. The servants who had stayed to clear the committee breakfast froze in doorways and near sideboards, each one hoping stillness might excuse them from being useful to the next lie. Sebastian did not look at Rosamund. That mattered. He did not ask her where the tray was. He did not search her expression for guilt. He turned instead to Mr. Bellamy. When was it last seen? Just before the ladies entered breakfast, Your Grace. I checked the study myself. The tray was wrapped on the side table. The door was locked afterward. Who held the key? I did, Your Grace. Did anyone enter? Mr. Bellamy's jaw tightened. Not by my permission. A coal scuttle was requested for the corridor fire. Mrs. Hodge sent a footman past the study passage. He says the study door remained closed. Mrs. Hodge, who had appeared near the blue drawing-room door, pressed her lips together. Lady Dorothea moved before the Duke could question further. This is very unfortunate, Sebastian. Let us not allow excitement to replace reason. The tray may have been misplaced in the confusion. Family silver does not misplace itself. No, but distressed people sometimes act without judgment. Lady Dorothea let the words rest gently in the room before she turned to Rosamund. Miss Ellery has been under uncommon strain. Lady Marian's expression sharpened. Dorothea, I am not accusing. I am observing what everyone must consider. Lavinia set down her cup, her voice full of wounded pity. Poverty corners even decent women. I should hate to think Miss Ellery acted from fear of further embarrassment. The accusation was worse for being softened. It did not point, it surrounded. Rosamund felt every servant hear it, every guest who had not yet left pause in the hall beyond the door, every piece of furniture become witness to another careful humiliation. She had been made servant, then scandal, and now thief. The progression was almost elegant. That made it vile. Sebastian's voice came low. Who accuses Miss Ellery? Lady Dorothea lifted her chin. Circumstance does. Circumstance has no rank in my house. It will not speak here unless a person lends it a tongue. Lavinia looked up at him. No one wants cruelty, Your Grace. We want clarity. Then use clear words, silence answered. For one breath, Rosamund felt the old dependence tug at her. Let him handle it. Let rank crush what poverty could not. But that would still leave her standing inside someone else's defense, waiting to learn whether she had been saved or merely displayed in a better light. She stepped forward. If my name is to be attached to this, let it be attached properly. Lady Dorothea's mouth tightened. You are in no position to dictate terms. No, my lady. That is why terms are necessary. Rosamund turned to Sebastian. Your Grace, I do not consent to my belongings being searched as entertainment for a rumor. Lavinia breathed out a soft laugh. Entertainment? What an ugly word for household necessity. It was an ugly necessity you were preparing. Rosamund's voice remained even. I ask that the house be searched in order, with witnesses. Begin where the tray was last kept, then the rooms and closets along the corridor, then the blue bedchamber. Only if evidence leads to my chamber should it be entered, and then with Lady Marian present. Lady Marian looked at her with open approval. At last someone in this house has remembered order, is not the enemy of truth. Sebastian's gaze rested on Rosamund. In it was anger, yes, but not at her. There was also something quieter, a recognition of the lesson he had learned too late that morning. It shall be done, as Miss Ellery requests. Lady Dorothea stiffened. You cannot let her turn a family matter into spectacle. You began the spectacle when you let her be accused before servants. He looked to Mr. Bellamy. The study first, then the corridor. Lady Marian will witness, Mrs. Hodge will attend. Lady Dorothea and Mrs. Dane may remain if they wish their concern to be useful. Lavinia's face cooled at the word. Rosamund felt no triumph. She felt steadiness which was rarer. The study had the unnatural neatness of a room disturbed, and then arranged to look innocent. The white linen still lay on the side table, folded back from a rectangular absence. The order book remained closed on the desk. The key register rested beside it. Sunlight touched the carpet near the servants' door, where the coal scuttle had passed earlier. Sebastian examined the lock, the side door, the table, and the floor without theatrical haste. Mr. Bellamy stood beside him, grim with the wounded pride of a butler whose order had been used against him. Mrs. Hodge hovered near the threshold, her keys silent at her waist for once. No scrape on the lock, Sebastian said. No sign the door was forced. Then someone with access entered, Lady Marian said. Or someone was let near enough while another person looked away. Mrs. Hodge bristled. With all this unsettled behavior, my lady, it is difficult to keep every girl exactly where she belongs. Rosamund looked at her. A girl's place is not wherever blame needs a body. Mrs. Hodge blushed. Sebastian did not rebuke Rosamund. He allowed the sentence to stand, and because he did, it altered the room. They moved into the corridor. A footman confirmed the coal scuttle. Another said Mrs. Hodge had sent him to fetch fresh candles, though no candles had been needed in daylight. Each answer tightened the circle without naming its center. The Blue Bedchamber came last among the rooms, though Lady Dorothea protested that searching it was an indignity to a guest. Sebastian opened the door himself. It became an indignity when my mother's room was used for deception. The bed had been made, the teacup was gone, the fire had been stirred low. Lavinia stood near the window, pale blue ribbons at her cuffs, her expression composed into injury. "I suppose my drawers are next?" she asked. "If evidence asks for them," Sebastian replied. "It has not yet." Rosamund looked carefully, not at the obvious places, but at Lavinia's hands, at the dressing table, at the empty space where the silver key had hung from her waist the previous day. No key. She let her gaze travel to the connecting passage beyond the room. There, half hidden by a panel, was a linen closet serving the guest rooms. It was close enough to Lavinia's chamber to imply access, far enough to allow denial, and domestic enough that no gentleman would think of it first. "That closet," Rosamund said. "Mrs." Hodge answered too quickly. "Only sheets and towels." Lady Marian turned. "Then it will be a brief disappointment." Mr. Bellamy unlocked the closet from his ring. The door opened on lavender sachets, folded linens, and shelves arranged with such perfect care that one misplaced fold showed like a guilty thought. Rosamund saw it at once. A white cloth had been pushed behind a stack of pillowcases on the lower shelf, but its corner was thicker than linen should be. She did not reach for it. "There, Mr." Bellamy drew on gloves before touching the cloth. That small act of care gave dignity to the truth before it was exposed. He pulled the bundle forward. The silver tray slid into the light, bright, unmistakable, and terrible in its return. A murmur passed through the corridor behind them. Lavinia's hand rose to her throat and stopped when she remembered the key was not there. Lady Dorothea's face went blank, not shocked, empty. That was worse. Beneath the tray, tangled in the linen, lay a narrow silver key on a pale ribbon. Lady Marian stepped closer. "Mrs. Dane, your trinket seems to have developed a taste for cupboards." Lavinia's eyes flashed. "That key is not mine." Rosamund looked at her. "Yesterday it hung at your waist. Many keys resemble each other. Few appear beside stolen silver near the room where they were last worn." Lavinia's mouth tightened. "You are very eager to accuse." "No," Rosamund said. "I am very tired of being accused by implication." Sebastian lifted the key by its ribbon and turned to Mr. Bellamy. "The late Duchess's press." Mr. Bellamy examined it. "It resembles the smaller key, Your Grace. Not the registered one, a duplicate or a private copy." Lady Dorothea drew a breath. "Old houses collect old keys. It proves nothing." "Then you should welcome further clarity," Sebastian said. Mr. Bellamy lifted the tray completely, and a folded napkin slipped from the top. A torn scrap of paper fluttered down with it and landed near Rosamund's shoe. She bent, then stopped herself before touching it. The habit of caution had become strength now. "Lady Marian, by the corner," the widow said. Rosamund picked up the scrap carefully. The paper was thick, cream, and torn from a larger note. Only a fragment remained. A dark line of ink, the end of a sentence, and two initials with the beginning of a name clear enough to chill the air. "I feign." Lady Dorothea made a small sound before she could prevent it. Lord Ivor's card from the previous night returned to Rosamund in one sharp image: the sleeve, the fear, the hidden name. Sebastian held out his hand, and Rosamund placed the scrap in it without their fingers touching. His restraint now felt less like distance than respect. "Lord Ivor will be asked to explain this," he said. Lady Dorothea recovered. "My brother writes to many people. Then he may begin by saying why part of his note lay beneath my mother's silver in a linen closet beside Mrs. Dane's room." Lavinia gave a brittle laugh. "This is absurd. Someone has planted it." "Yes," Rosamund said quietly. Every eye turned to her. "Someone has planted several things. A forged order, a story about me, a tray in a closet. The question is not whether something was planted. It is whose hands still hold the soil." The corridor went silent. This time, no one asked whether poverty had cornered her. No one spoke of nerves or pride. The tray had been found, and with it the first clean break in the lie. Rosamund was not free yet. London had already begun to taste her name. But she was not alone beneath the accusation. Sebastian stood beside the open closet, the torn scrap in his hand, and he did not look late. The carriage for Brook Street stood ready before evening, and its very readiness felt like another hand, pressing Rosamund toward a story she had not chosen. It waited at the side entrance with lamps unlit, a folded rug on the seat, and Lady Marian's maid standing beside a small trunk packed so neatly that even flight looked respectable. Calderwick House had grown quieter since the tray was found. Quiet did not mean peace. It meant every person inside had begun revising what they knew, what they had seen, and what they might be made to swear if the matter came before the wrong witnesses. Lady Marian stood in the hall with her gloves in one hand, watching Rosamund as if she already knew the answer and wished her to speak it aloud. "Brook Street is still open to you," she said. "My spare room is dull, clean, and too respectable for invention. You could sleep there tonight without listening to this house, breathe lies through the walls." Rosamund looked toward the servants' stair. Somewhere below, Pippa would be folding linen with hands that shook each time Mrs. Hodge passed. Somewhere above, Lavinia would be arranging her face for the next version. Lady Dorothea would be writing, perhaps, or burning what had become inconvenient. Lord Evo Fane's name had entered the matter on a torn scrap of paper, and had not yet been made to answer for itself. "If I leave now," Rosamund said, "the house will decide what my leaving means." "Yes," Lady Marian said, "it will. They will say I was removed because suspicion remained, or because I was unwell, or because His Grace was kind, and I mistook kindness for an invitation. That last one has already occurred to them, no doubt. Then I cannot vanish into it." Lady Marian's expression softened, though her tone stayed brisk. "Courage is sometimes only stubbornness wearing its best bonnet. Then I shall wear it." The Duke came from the study corridor before Lady Marian could answer. Sebastian had the recovered tray locked again under Mr. Bellamy's care, and the torn fragment from Lord Ivo's note sealed in an envelope on his desk. His eyes moved from the carriage cloak to Rosamund. "Miss Ellery, I will not order you away." The sentence mattered because she could hear what it cost him not to do so. "But I will say plainly that Brook Street is safer. For my body, perhaps. Your reputation matters also. My reputation will not improve by leaving the room while other people describe it." He looked at her for a long moment. "You mean to stay, under Lady Marian's protection, not alone, not recklessly?" "But, yes, why?" The question was not challenge. It was invitation. Rosamund answered with the part of herself that no longer wished to sound easier than she was. "Because Pippa is still here. Because Mrs. Hodge has already tried to place blame where it can do least damage to rank. Because the tray, the key, the seal, the note, and Lord Ivo's initials all remain in this house. If I leave, I become the least complicated explanation." Lady Marian nodded once. Sebastian's face tightened with anger held in check. "I can investigate without you being endangered. You can investigate the house. I can hear what the house says when it forgets. I am someone worth guarding against." A faint shift crossed his mouth. Not amusement, not quite admiration. "You understand invisibility as a method. I have been taught by experts." That landed more sharply than she had intended. He accepted it. "Then remain. But you will not move through the house without Lady Marian's knowledge, or Mr. Bellamy's." "Agreed. And any servant who threatens Pippa or any other girl will answer to me. They may not threaten in words that sound serious to a gentleman." His gaze deepened. "Then tell me how to hear them." The question moved through her like a door opening where she had expected a wall. For a moment, she did not trust herself to answer. Listen when a servant is told she has been fortunate. It often means she is being warned not to speak. Sebastian inclined his head, grave as if she had handed him an estate matter of great importance. "Then I shall listen." By the following morning, Rosamund began collecting truth in pieces small enough not to frighten the people who carried it. Madame Bellier came first, summoned to adjust a bodice for Lady Dorothea before the next evening's reception. The dressmaker found Rosamund waiting with Lady Marian in the small sitting room, tea poured, and account papers arranged without flourish. Madame Bellier's eyes went to Lady Marian, and then to Rosamund. "I didn't know Miss Ellery would attend." "Briefly," Rosamund said. "I have one question about a shawl." The dressmaker's fingers tightened on her measuring tape. "Ladies order many shawls. This one was dove grey, embroidered with pearls, copied from the portrait of the late Duchess of Calderwick." Madame Bellier glanced toward the door. Lady Marian stirred her tea. "Do not look for rescue there, it is only oak." The dressmaker swallowed. "I don't speak of clients, nor should you. But if the account was charged through Lady Dorothea's household allowance, it concerns the house." Rosamund slid a folded bill across the table. Madame Bellier read it and lost a shade of colour. "The shawl was ordered 3 weeks ago." "For Lady Dorothea?" "No, for Mrs. Dane." The dressmaker hesitated. "For a lady who said she might soon need to appear familiar with Calderwick grief." Lady Marian's cup stopped halfway to the saucer. Rosamund wrote the phrase in the small notebook she had once used to copy household recipes. Nobody thanked her for preserving. "Who paid?" "A gentleman's servant. He wore Lord Evo Fane's colours." The name lay on the table with more weight than silver. Rosamund did not react. She had learned that people offered more to calm listeners than to shocked ones. "Thank you, that will be all. Miss Ellery, I meant no harm." Rosamund looked up. "Few people do, Madame Bellier. That is why harm finds so many willing hands." In the covered yard that afternoon, Rosamund carried Lady Marian's note about carriage availability to Mr. Keene, the senior coachman. Horses stamped behind their stalls, and damp straw sweetened the air. It was easier to breathe there than in rooms perfumed by deceit. Mr. Keene touched his hat. "Her ladyship wants the closed carriage kept ready." "Yes, and I wish to ask whether Lord Ivo Fane came by the side entrance last week." He looked away at once. "I drive where ordered, miss. I am not asking where you drove him after, only how he entered Calderwick House." Mr. Keene rubbed one thumb along the folded paper. "Side entrance. Twice. Late. Once with a flat case for papers. Once with nothing, but he left with Mrs. Dane's maid in his carriage." Rosamund's pencil paused. "Her maid? Only to Bond Street, they said." "I didn't ask. Who paid the extra stable fee?" He looked at her then, measuring whether truth would cost him. "Mrs. Dane's maid." "With a new sovereign. Did she seem accustomed to such money?" "No, miss." His voice lowered. "And begging pardon, but Mrs. Hodge said downstairs girls who chatter can lose more than a place." There it was. Fortune in another dress. Warning disguised as discipline. Rosamund closed the notebook. "You have not chattered, Mr. Keene. You have answered a question properly put." His shoulders eased. "Then I hope proper questions become the fashion." She almost smiled. "So do I." By late afternoon, she sat in Lady Marian's sitting room with the notebook open. Copied shawl, Lord Ivo's servant, side entrance, Bond Street carriage, Mrs. Dane's maid, new sovereign, I. Fane. The facts looked thin separately. Together, they began to show the outline of a bargain. Lord Evo had debts large enough to disturb household accounts. Lavinia wanted to appear already entwined with Calderwick grief and intimacy. Lady Dorothea held the keys and authority needed to open old rooms. Rosamund had been chosen not by accident, but because a poor gentlewoman could serve two purposes. She could carry the first humiliation, and later she could carry the blame. Lady Marian read the list over her shoulder. "You have bones, not yet the heart. Money is often the heart, rank is the pulse." Lady Marian gave her a look of approval she pretended was irritation. "Do not become too clever. It alarms the mediocre." Rosamund copied a clean timeline for the Duke. She removed every wounded phrase. She did not write that Lavinia had smiled when the tea burned her. She wrote that Mrs. Dane requested bedchamber service after a forged instruction. She did not write that Lady Dorothea had made gratitude feel like a debt that could never be paid. She wrote that Lady Dorothea possessed registered authority over the late Duchess' desk, press, and old seal. She did not write that Sebastian's delayed silence at breakfast had hurt, because she had begun to rely on his seeing her. That belonged nowhere in evidence, and perhaps nowhere at all. She sealed the paper with plain wax and gave it to Mr. Bellamy, for his grace. No reply is required. Near the servant's stair, Pippa appeared with folded towels clutched to her chest. Miss, Rosamund turned. Yes, Mrs. Hodge says I've been lucky. The girl's voice trembled around the word. She says luck turns if a girl forgets who feeds her. Rosamund felt cold anger rise. Have you been threatened? Not in words that would matter upstairs. They matter to me. Pippa looked down. I saw Mrs. Dane's maid near the study passage before the tray went missing. I didn't say before because she'd say it was me there instead. I send wages home. My little brothers need them. Rosamund stepped closer but did not touch her. I will not force you to speak before you are protected. Pippa's eyes shone. Why do you help me? Because I know what it is to be told silence is the rent one pays for shelter. That evening, as the house settled into its watchful hush, a footman Rosamund did not recognize appeared near her chamber, and bowed with his face half turned from the lamp. For you, miss. Delivered by hand. He was gone before she could ask by whom. The note was folded on expensive cream paper, unsealed, and scented faintly with violets. Inside, in a hand made to resemble the Duke's severe script, stood 7 words. Come to my study at midnight. Alone, Rosamund read it once. Then again. The trap had failed with silver and breakfast. Now it had dressed itself as invitation. The forged invitation did not frighten Rosamund because it was bold. It frightened her because it understood the house so well. Come to my study at midnight. Alone. 7 words were enough to turn a woman's caution into guilt, her obedience into ambition, her presence behind a closed door into a scandal that would never need proof. She stood beneath the corridor lamp, with the cream paper held between finger and thumb, breathing the faint violet scent that clung to it like a signature written for the nose rather than the eye. The hand imitated the Duke's severe script, but it lacked his restraint. The letters leaned too eagerly toward the end. Whoever had written it had imagined triumph before finishing the line. Rosamund did not go to the study. She went to Lady Marian's door and knocked once. The widow opened it almost at once, candle in hand, as if she had been waiting for scandal to become punctual. What is it? Rosamund handed her the note. Lady Marian read it, and all sleep left her face. Well, either Sebastian has become a fool after sunset, or someone believes you have. I thought the second more likely. Good. Never lose the habit of insulting a trap before entering it. Within minutes, Mr. Bellamy had been summoned quietly, and the Duke arrived from below, still fully dressed. He looked as though rest had passed through the house, and decided not to trouble him. When he took the note, his expression did not change at first. Then the coldness came, layer by layer, not toward Rosamund but around her. Where did you receive this? Near my chamber. A footman I did not recognize gave it to me, Mr. Bellamy's face tightened. There is no footman on the evening list I would not recognize, miss. Sebastian held the paper toward the lamp. The watermark. Lady Marian stepped closer. Fane and Whitcomb, Bond Street. Lady Dorothea's favored stationer, unless half of London has suddenly developed her taste for expensive cream paper. Rosamund kept her voice steady. It also smells of violets. Lady Marian's eyes sharpened. Mrs. Dane, or someone handling her paper, her gloves, or her maid. Sebastian looked up. You did not consider coming to the study? No. Why? The question was so direct that it might have offended another woman. Rosamund heard something else beneath it. He needed to know whether the trap had been close. Because you would not write such a note. You know my hand so well, not well enough for vanity. Well enough for caution. For a moment, his gaze held hers. The corridor narrowed to the paper between them and the knowledge that trust, once spoken, could not be easily made harmless again. Mr. Bellamy cleared his throat with perfect discretion. Your Grace, shall I check the side entrances? Yes, quietly. Wake no one unless necessary. Ask the hall porter who opened any door after 10. Mr. Bellamy bowed and vanished. Lady Marian folded her arms. Now we must discuss what Miss Ellery was meant to become by morning. No one needed to answer. A woman discovered in the Duke's study at midnight, alone, with a false note in his hand or hers, would not require evidence of wrongdoing. Society preferred suggestion because it could dress suggestion for any occasion. Sebastian's fingers closed around the paper. You cannot remain exposed to this. Rosamund heard the shift before he finished speaking. It was not anger. It was fear dressed as command. Your Grace, tomorrow's reception will be worse than breakfast. Lavinia has failed in private, then in public, then in accusation. Now she reaches for compromise. If you stand in that room tomorrow, every glance will be a blade. Glances are not new to me. These will be sharpened under my roof, then let them be seen. His voice lowered. No. You will remain upstairs tomorrow with Lady Marian. I will confront them in the drawing room. Once the matter is settled, you may descend without risk. Lady Marian said nothing. That silence was its own form of warning. Rosamund looked at Sebastian carefully. She understood the kindness in his error. He was not trying to dismiss her. He was building a wall, and because he was a duke, walls came easily to his hands. He did not yet understand that women without power often found walls indistinguishable from cages, even when lined with protection. No, she said. He went still. Miss Ellery, no, Your Grace. You do not know what that room may do to you. I know better than you do. The words struck cleanly. He did not flinch, but his face changed, as if some part of him had received them before pride could refuse. Rosamund continued before courage made way for apology. You know how society wounds from above. I know how it wounds when one has nowhere to go afterward. If I am hidden upstairs while my name is discussed below, they will say my absence proves shame. If you defend me without me, they will say gratitude has made me useful in another way. If you end the matter with me out of sight, the story will still belong to those who saw a space where I should have stood. His jaw tightened. I am trying to keep you from being harmed. I know. Her voice softened because the truth was not his cruelty, and she would not pretend it was. That is why this is difficult. The admission seemed to reach him more deeply than anger would have done. I saw what happened this morning, he said. I was late. Yes. I let calculation delay what decency should have done. Yes, do you think I have forgotten that? No, she looked at the forged note in his hand. I think you remember it so sharply that you are about to make another choice from fear. Lady Marian turned her head slightly, as if hiding satisfaction behind the candle flame. Sebastian looked away down the dark corridor. For the first time since she had known him, he seemed not cold, but cornered by his own conscience. If I let you stand there and they injure you again, I will have allowed it. If you do not let me stand there, you will have chosen the injury for me. The words fell between them. Not loud. Not dramatic, irreversible. He looked back. You ask me to trust you to face them. I ask you to trust me to stand, and if I fail to speak at the right moment, then I will speak. And you may stand beside me when I ask you to. His breath left him slowly. Not before you, not before me, unless I ask, not over you, never over me. Lady Marian made a small approving sound. Excellent. I do enjoy hearing a duke receive instruction without fainting. For one fragile second, almost a smile touched Sebastian's mouth. It disappeared before it could become comfort. Very well. Rosamund had prepared herself to argue longer. Very well. You will attend tomorrow's reception under Lady Marian's chaperonage. You will not be hidden if Mrs. Dane or Lady Dorothea attempts to use this note. I will hold the room still. If you choose to speak, I will not interrupt. If you choose not to, I will answer. That is nearly what I asked. Nearly is all I can promise, while I am still learning. The humility in it unsettled her more than command would have done. She had known men who expected gratitude for noticing pain after it had become impossible to ignore. She had known men who mistook possession for rescue. She had not known what to do with a man powerful enough to overrule her and disciplined enough, at last, not to. Mr. Bellamy returned before the silence could become too intimate. Your Grace, the side entrance was opened shortly after 11 by Mrs. Dane's maid. She claimed a headache and said she needed air. The hall porter saw her return, but he admits he had dozed before she came back. No outside footman is recorded. Sebastian's eyes turned hard. No one is dismissed tonight. No one is threatened into an answer. The maid will be questioned tomorrow with Lady Marian present. Rosamund heard her own lessons inside his order and felt something loosen behind her ribs. "Thank you," she said. He looked at her. "For what?" "For listening when I told you how fear sounds below stairs." "I should have known sooner." "Yes," the answer was quiet. It did not forgive him cheaply. His expression told her he valued that more than comfort. Lady Marian took the forged note and slid it into an envelope. "This will be kept with the other documents. Now everyone will attempt sleep, except those too guilty for rest. Let us hope they become careless." When Rosamund returned to her chamber, Lady Marian accompanied her to the door. "You did well," the widow said. "I am afraid." "Of course you are. Courage without fear is usually vanity." Rosamund touched the door handle. "Do you think he understood?" Lady Marian looked toward the dark corridor, where the Duke had remained speaking with Mr. Bellamy. "He understood enough to be ashamed. That is often where men begin if there is hope for them." Sleep came late and lightly. At dawn, Rosamund rose and dressed in her plain grey gown, choosing it not for meekness, but because it had survived being underestimated. Pippa brought hot water and whispered, "Are you going down today, miss?" Rosamund met the girl's eyes in the mirror. "Yes. Aren't you afraid?" "Yes." Pippa looked startled, as if bravery should have denied it. Rosamund fastened her cup over the fading burn. "Fear may come with me. It may not speak for me." By late morning, calling cards began arriving for the evening reception. Lady Wrexham, Sir Alistair and Lady Pembroke, committee patrons, Westmere relations. Each name lay on the salver like a witness being assembled by pride, curiosity, and fate. At the bottom was one card edged in black, Mrs. Lavinia Dane had written across the back in her elegant slanted hand. "I trust Miss Ellery will be well enough to appear." Rosamund placed it beside the forged midnight note. The trap had failed in darkness, now it had invited an audience. By evening, Calderwick House had filled with people who had come for charity, stayed for curiosity, and hoped to leave with a version of the truth that would flatter their own discernment. Carriages rolled up before the portico in a glittering line, and names entered before their owners did, carried on salvers by footmen whose faces had been trained into silver stillness. Lady Wrexham arrived in dark amethyst with diamonds at her throat and a gaze sharp enough to open letters. Sir Alistair Pembroke came with Lady Pembroke on his arm, grave, observant, and clearly aware that widow's relief had become entangled with something less charitable. Committee patrons followed. Westmere relations appeared in pairs, wearing family concern, as if it had been pressed for the occasion. Rosamund descended beside Lady Marian, in the plain grey gown she had chosen that morning. It was not fashionable enough to compete, and not shabby enough to be pitied honestly. That suited her. She had no wish to look rescued. She wished to look present. The drawing room blazed with candles, gilt mirrors, and polished tables arranged to make society believe it had been invited for order rather than appetite. Lady Dorothea stood near the mantel in violet silk, her fan moving with slow command. Lavinia Dane wore ivory gauze and mourning pearls, her pale hair arranged with the fragility of a woman who meant to seem injured before anyone named a wound. Sebastian stood near the far door, with Mr. Bellamy behind him. He did not cross to Rosamund at once. He looked at her, and the smallest inclination of his head passed between them like a promise remembered. Not before her, not over her, beside her when asked. Lady Marian's gloved hand touched Rosamund's sleeve for 1 second, then withdrew. "Breathe," she murmured. "If anyone faints, let it be someone who deserves the attention." Rosamund's mouth almost curved, almost. For half an hour, the reception performed civilization. Tea was poured. Wine was declined by ladies who wanted their senses unblurred. The Seamen's Widows' Relief Committee was mentioned often enough to justify the gathering, and not enough to inconvenience those who had come for scandal. Lady Wrexham asked after the correspondence in a voice that made Lady Dorothea's fan pause once. Sir Alistair spoke quietly with the Duke near the bookshelves. Lady Pembroke watched Rosamund with a troubled kindness that did not yet dare become public support. Lavinia moved from guest to guest, accepting murmured sympathy with lowered lashes. At last, she drifted toward the center table, where charity papers had been laid out beside a porcelain bowl of white roses. "How charmingly everything has been restored," she said, lifting one flower and letting it fall back among the rest. "After so much distress over household objects, I almost expected that famous tray to be placed among the committee records. It has become a token of confusion, hasn't it?" A few guests gave faint laughter, not because the remark was funny, because laughter is often the tax paid to power. Rosamund felt the room turn without appearing to turn. Lady Dorothea's fan moved again. Lavinia sighed as if regretting her own wit. "Forgive me, I shouldn't jest. Some objects gather painful meanings when pride has been touched." She did not look at Rosamund until the last word. She did not need to. The room did it for her. Rosamund heard again the breakfast room, the phrase "tender nerves," the silence that had forced her to stand alone. This time the silence had a different shape. It waited for her choice. She stepped forward. Perhaps the tray should be brought in. Lavinia blinked. "I beg your pardon. If it has become a token, Mrs. Dane, we may as well let it speak accurately." Lady Dorothea's fan closed. "Miss Ellery, this is neither necessary nor suitable. It became necessary when it was used. It became suitable when it was discussed before guests." Rosamund turned to the butler. "Mr. Bellamy, would you be so kind as to bring the Calderwick tray?" Mr. Bellamy looked to the Duke. Sebastian did not answer for her. He only said, "Do as Miss Ellery requests." A current moved through the room. Lady Wrexham's eyes sharpened with open interest. Lady Marian's expression remained severe, but pride warmed the edges of it. When Mr. Bellamy returned, 2 footmen followed with the silver tray wrapped in white linen. They placed it on the center table, then stepped back. The cloth was lifted. Candlelight ran along the rim. The old engraving flashed and disappeared under the changing light. Rosamund waited until every eye had found the object. "This tray was not ordinary breakfast silver," she said. "It belonged to the late Duchess Beatrice Vale, and was kept among family pieces connected to Brackenlay Hall." She pointed, careful not to touch. "Here, beneath the rim, is the engraving. B. Vale Brackenlay." Mr. Bellamy raised the tray enough for those nearest to see. Lady Wrexham leaned forward. "It is there." Lady Dorothea's voice cooled. "A family object in a family house. How astonishing." "It was not in its proper cabinet," Rosamund said. "It was sent to the Blue Bedchamber with a forged order under the Calderwick seal. On the underside of the handle is black wax caught in an old scratch. It shows the seal and tray were handled together before the tray came to me." Lavinia smiled faintly. "You have spent unusual time studying silver for a woman who claims not to covet it." Rosamund looked at her. "I studied the object used to shame me. That is not coveting. That is remembering," Lady Marian said. "An unfashionable habit, but a useful one." A nervous ripple moved through the room. Rosamund continued before it could become chatter. When the tray vanished from His Grace's locked study, Lady Dorothea suggested distress and poverty might have made me remove it. Mrs. Dane pitied me for being cornered by need. Lavinia's hand tightened on her pearls. I spoke compassionately. "You spoke carefully." Rosamund took the folded napkin from Mr. Bellamy's salver. The tray was later found in the linen closet near the Blue Bedchamber, wrapped behind pillowcases. With it was a silver key on a pale ribbon. Lady Marian stepped forward. "I saw that key at Mrs. Dane's waist the previous day. So did Miss Ellery." Lavinia's eyes flashed. "Many keys look alike." Mr. Bellamy bowed. "This key fits the smaller lock of the late Duchess' press, Mrs. Dane." "It is not the registered key in my charge," Lady Wrexham murmured. "A very industrious trinket." Lady Dorothea lifted her chin. "Old houses are full of duplicate keys, and old houses are often used by people who know where to find them," Rosamund said. She picked up the torn scrap by its corner. Beneath the tray lay this piece of paper. It bears a fragment of a name, I Fane. A Westmere cousin whispered something and stopped when Sebastian turned his head. The room quieted at once. Lavinia gave a soft laugh. A torn scrap proves nothing, except that Miss Ellery has learned drama from being indulged. Then let us add what is not dramatic, Rosamund said. Madame Bellier confirmed that the dove-grey pearl shawl worn by Mrs. Dane in the Blue Bedchamber was ordered 3 weeks ago and paid for by a servant in Lord Ivo Fane's colours. Mr. Keene, the senior coachman, confirmed that Lord Ivo entered by the side door twice, once with a flat paper case, and that Mrs. Dane's maid rode in his carriage to Bond Street. Lady Wrexham received a forged instruction under His Grace's name, delaying committee funds. Lady Wrexham straightened. I did. I have given the note to His Grace. Sir Alister's grave voice followed. And I have examined the account summary. The irregularity is not imaginary. The room no longer leaned toward amusement. It leaned toward consequence. Lady Dorothea moved from the mantel. Enough. This is a grotesque display, Miss Ellery. You stand in my nephew's drawing room and string together servant gossip. Tradeswomen's bills, and a poor girl's resentment, then call it truth. Rosamund felt the blow and did not absorb it. No, my lady, I call it sequence. You forget yourself. No. I remembered too much. Lavinia stepped in quickly, choosing injury now that ridicule had thinned. Your Grace, surely you won't allow this. Miss Ellery has wanted from the beginning to turn ordinary kindness into persecution. She resents me because she imagined my place here meant something it didn't. Rosamund turned to her. I did not imagine your place, Mrs. Dane. You arranged it. You wore the late Duchess's likeness, occupied her room, used her tray, and then tried to make my poverty explain the discomfort your performance created. Lavinia's mouth hardened. You want him to look at you. The room stiffened. There it was at last. Not silver, not handwriting, not keys, a woman's old weapon against another woman. Rosamund felt Sebastian move, then stop. He was keeping his promise. He held the room with his stillness, but he did not take her answer. No, Rosamund said. I wanted someone to look at what was done. There is a difference. Lady Pembroke's eyes shone. Lady Wrexham looked no longer entertained, but convinced. From the edge of the room, Rosamund glimpsed Pippa through the half-open door, pale and trembling. The sight steadied her more than applause could have done. If she spoke well now, the story would travel below stairs too. It would tell frightened girls that accusation did not always win, because it had a better gown. Lady Dorothea's control cracked by one narrow line. Sebastian, if you permit this spectacle, you choose a dependent woman's vanity over family honor. The Duke stepped at last to Rosamund's side. Not before her, beside her. The placement was clear enough to make the room understand, and restrained enough to deny vulgarity any satisfaction. Family honor is not preserved by hiding family rot. Lady Dorothea's fan stilled completely. He turned to Mr. Bellamy, the key register. Mr. Bellamy opened the book on the side table. The late Duchess's writing desk, old seal box, and Blue Bedchamber press were under Lady Dorothea Fane's recorded authority. Lady Dorothea gave a short laugh. For safekeeping, then let safekeeping answer, Sebastian said, his voice lowered. Shall I name the hand that opened my mother's desk, or will you? Lady Dorothea's fan slipped from her fingers and struck the carpet, small, white, and loud enough for every guest in the room to remember. Lady Dorothea's fan lay on the carpet between the silver tray and the guests, small enough to be ignored and loud enough to have changed the room forever. No one stooped to lift it. Lady Dorothea looked down at it as if the fan, not she, had betrayed something private. Then her chin rose with the pride of a woman who had spent years turning impropriety into management. You enjoy this, Sebastian, she said. You stand before strangers and humiliate your mother's kin as if family loyalty were a defect. The Duke did not look away from her. Family loyalty doesn't require forged instructions, stolen silver, or frightened servants. A murmur moved through the drawing room. Lady Wrexham stopped it with one lifted hand, not from kindness, but because she did not wish to miss a word. Rosamund stood beside Sebastian, close enough that the room saw his choice, and far enough that no one could pretend he was speaking for her. The placement steadied her more than any declaration could have done. Lady Dorothea's eyes went to the key register on the table. I held keys because your mother trusted me. After her death, I preserved what you were too grief-stricken to face. You preserved nothing, he said. You used her desk to conduct family business, to use my seal. Don't make a relic into a crime. I am making a forged order into evidence, Mr. Bellamy stepped forward at the Duke's slight nod. The old Calderwick seal box was registered to the late Duchess's writing desk, my lady. Lady Dorothea held authority over that desk. No request for the seal was entered in the household book. Lady Dorothea turned on him with a look that would once have sent half the servants backward. You forget your place. No, Sebastian said. He remembers mine. Mr. Bellamy bowed and remained where he stood. Lady Wrexham then unfolded a paper from her reticule. For clarity, I will confirm before the room that I received a written instruction under His Grace's name, delaying the widow's disbursements. His Grace has denied writing it. Sir Alistair has seen it. Sir Alistair Pembroke inclined his head. The hand is not His Grace's. More importantly, the delay allowed certain pledged sums to be treated as if already controlled by Calderwick authority. Lady Dorothea's colour sharpened. You all speak as if accounts are poetry. People see what they wish to see in lines and ink. Lady Marian's voice came dry and merciless. Yes. Some people even see charity funds as family convenience. Lavinia, who had stood very still near the roses, moved before the room could fully turn against Lady Dorothea. This is cruel, she said softly. Lady Dorothea made errors. Perhaps she feared embarrassment. Perhaps Lord Ivo pressed too hard. But you can't destroy a woman of her age in public to please Miss Ellery. Rosamund felt the blow beneath the softness. There it was again. Please, Miss Ellery. Make Rosamund the appetite behind the truth. Sebastian's hand shifted once at his side, then stilled. He was holding the room, not taking her answer. Rosamund looked at Lavinia. Truth existed before I was permitted to speak it. Lavinia's eyes hardened. How noble poverty sounds when a duke is listening. Before Rosamund could answer, Mr. Bellamy appeared to glance toward the door, and the next name entered the room like a match touched to paper. Lord Ivo Fane, your grace. Lord Ivo came in with a smile, too ready for the silence that received him. He was handsome in the polished, tired way of men who have spent other people's money, as if charm were a promissory note. His gaze moved from Lady Dorothea to Lavinia, then to the silver tray, the key register, and the torn scrap in Sebastian's hand. The smile thinned. I seem to have interrupted a family council. No, Sebastian said. You have arrived in time to join it. Lord Ivo gave a short laugh. If this concerns some foolish domestic flutter, my sister's nerves have been punished enough. It concerns £400 marked as roof repairs, creditor payments made through false entries, a forged instruction sent to Lady Wrexham, a tray hidden near Mrs. Dane's room, and this, Sebastian held up the torn scrap, part of your hand. Lord Ivo's face remained smooth, but his eyes betrayed him by going first to Lavinia. Lady Wrexham saw it. So did half the room. A scrap of paper, he said. My dear Calderwick, you'd drag a gentleman through mud over a scrap? No. Over the scrap and the statement delivered by my solicitor's clerk 10 minutes before the guests arrived. Sebastian took a sealed paper from Mr. Bellamy. Your creditor received payment 2 days after the first false roof entry. The second payment followed the forged charity delay. The third was routed through a servant wearing your colours. Lord Ivo's smile died. Lady Dorothea whispered. Ivo, he rounded on her. You said it couldn't be traced. The room became utterly still. The sentence could not be gathered back. Lady Dorothea closed her eyes for one brief second, and in that second the proud aunt vanished. What remained was a woman who had mistaken control for intelligence and family rescue for entitlement. Lavinia stepped away from Lord Ivo, as if distance could unwrite association. I knew nothing of his debts. No, Rosamund said. You knew what they could buy. Lavinia turned on her. You insolent little moralist, the polish cracked at last, not fully enough. You think because you stood here with papers and pity, you've become something more than a dependent companion? No, Rosamund said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. I was always something more. That was the part you found inconvenient. Lady Pembroke's hand tightened around her handkerchief. Pippa stood half-hidden beyond the door, pale and trembling. But Rosamund did not look away from Lavinia. This answer was for the drawing room, and for the servants' passage both. Lavinia's mouth curved with desperation disguised as disdain. You want him to choose you. That's what this has always been. You turned a simple kindness into persecution, because you couldn't bear seeing a woman fit for his world where you could never belong. The final cruelty struck exactly where it had been aimed. Rosamund felt it, but she did not bend around it. Sebastian spoke then, low and absolute. Mrs. Dane. Lavinia turned to him, breath quick beneath her pearls. You'd choose a poor companion over a woman fit to be duchess? The silence after that sentence seemed to hold every candle flame still. Sebastian did not glance at Rosamund first, and she loved him a little for that restraint, because he was not using her face to find courage. A duchess isn't made by cruelty in silk. Lavinia went white. Lady Wrexham's eyes widened with the rare pleasure of hearing a sentence London would repeat accurately. Sebastian continued, his voice controlled enough to be more devastating than anger. You will leave Calderwick House tonight, under Lady Wrexham's supervision, and remain where she places you until your own arrangements are made. Your name will be removed from every Calderwick invitation. Any further falsehood concerning Miss Ellery will be answered publicly and by my solicitor. Lady Wrexham accepted the duty with a slight bow. I shall see she reaches a respectable roof and does not mistake it for triumph. Sebastian turned to Lady Dorothea. You will go to the Westmere Dower property by the end of the week. Your allowance will continue, but it will be paid through my solicitor. You will hold no Calderwick keys, seals, correspondence, household authority, or charity accounts again. Lady Dorothea's pride struggled, then failed to find purchase. I did what was necessary to save Evo. You sacrificed the powerless because family consequence offended you. His gaze moved to Lord Evo. Calderwick patronage is withdrawn. Your debts will be examined. If you cooperate, the matter may remain with solicitors. If you don't, you may explain forged authority wherever my solicitor decides. Lord Ivo looked around the room for an ally and found only witnesses. At the door, Mrs. Hodge had appeared, rigid with dread. Sebastian did not raise his voice. Mrs. Hodge, you obeyed false authority because it flattered rank and threatened those beneath you. You will leave service with wages due, and a reference stating only the dates of employment. She gripped the doorframe. Your Grace, I've served this house for years. Then you knew better. Rosamund heard a soft breath from the servants in the passage. Not joy, something more fragile. Possibility. Lady Marian stepped forward, her voice cutting through what remained of spectacle. Let the record of this evening be simple. Miss Ellery was ordered, shamed, accused, and nearly compromised because she was believed too dependent to defend herself. She defended herself anyway. Rosamund looked at her then, and the room blurred for one dangerous second, not with tears shed, but with tears refused. Sebastian turned slightly toward the guests. No servant or dependent woman under my roof is to be used for amusement, convenience, or blame. That order stands tonight and after tonight. The words did not erase the morning in the Blue Bedchamber. They did something better. They made repetition costly. Lavinia left first, escorted by Lady Wrexham, who looked as if she had been entrusted with a venomous jewel. Lord Ivo followed under the gaze of Sir Alistair and Mr. Bellamy. Lady Dorothea bent, picked up her fallen fan herself, and walked out without looking at Rosamund. When the door closed, the drawing room seemed to exhale. Guests murmured their departures with less appetite than they had arrived. Lady Pembroke took Rosamund's hand and said, "You were very brave." Rosamund answered, "I was very tired." Lady Pembroke's eyes softened as if that truth mattered more. At last, only Lady Marian, Mr. Bellamy, Sebastian, and Rosamund remained near the silver tray. Candlelight rested on the old engraving. Sebastian faced Rosamund, with all the rank stripped from his expression, leaving only the man and the care he no longer tried to disguise. Miss Ellery, I would like permission to call upon you properly, under Lady Marian's eye, and under whatever terms you choose, not as rescue, not as reparation. Because I would know you without a lie standing between us. Rosamund's heart moved painfully, but she did not lower her eyes. My first term is this. No woman in Calderwick House, servant or dependent, is ever again to be made sport for rank. Agreed. Pippa remains employed and trained if she wishes it. Agreed. And if you call upon me, you don't hide me when truth becomes uncomfortable. He bowed not as victor, but as a man receiving terms. Miss Ellery, I wouldn't dare ask for less. Lady Marian made a satisfied sound near the mantel. Rosamund looked at the tray, then at the Duke standing beside it. Public justice had not made her safe all at once. It had made safety possible. That was enough for tonight. The first breakfast tray Rosamund received as Duchess of Calderwick was not brought by a maid. She discovered that before she saw it, before she smelled the chocolate, warm bread, and strawberries, before morning fully entered the breakfast room at Brackenlay Hall, she heard the door open behind her, and turned from the tall windows expecting Pippa, only to find Sebastian standing there with the old silver tray in his own hands. For one suspended breath, the room vanished. There was no Sussex sunlight, no polished sideboard, no long table laid for two, no pale green lawn beyond the glass. There was only a corridor in Calderwick House, a burn beneath her cup, a folded order sealed in black wax, and a woman's voice telling her to stand while another woman ate. Sebastian did not move closer. That was how she knew he remembered too. I can take it away, he said. If it hurts you, I'll lock it up and have another brought. Rosamund looked at the tray. Candlelight and accusation no longer clung to it. Morning did. The engraving near the rim caught the sun as he held it steady. Beevale, Brackenlay. You carried it yourself, she said. Yes. Why? He crossed the room only after her eyes gave him permission, then set the tray on the table with a care so exact it felt almost like apology. Because service freely given is not shame. Because the first time I saw you with this tray, it had been placed in your hands to lower you. I wanted this morning to answer that one. Her fingers rested against the back of a chair. 3 months should have been long enough to make peace feel familiar. It was not. Peace had its own strangeness. It entered softly, asked for trust, and frightened the part of her that had survived by expecting cost. She had become Duchess 2 days earlier in the chapel at Brackenlay, after a courtship proper enough to satisfy Lady Marian and patient enough to satisfy Rosamund. Sebastian had called under supervision, written letters in his own severe hand, walked beside her in Hyde Park, waited when she hesitated, and never once treated scandal as a debt she owed him. Lady Marian had approved the wedding with the air of a judge sparing the accused for promising reform. London had spoken as London always did, but Lady Wrexham had made certain the first version travelling through drawing rooms contained the truth. Lavinia Dane had vanished from respectable invitation lists, with the elegance of a curtain being drawn. Lady Dorothea lived at the Westmere Dower property, with no Calderwick keys and no authority over any woman who needed shelter. Lord Ivor's charm had not survived his creditors. Mrs. Hodge had departed service, and Calderwick House had learned that old habits could lose employment. None of that filled the room now. It had already been judged. This morning was not about them. It was about what remained after justice ceased being spectacle and became daily life. Before breakfast, Rosamund had walked through Brackenlay Hall alone, learning the lower passages by choice rather than necessity. Servants had stopped at the sight of her, some curtsying too deeply, some watching for the first sign of what sort of duchess she meant to become. In the still room, she had found Pippa correcting a young scullery girl who had nearly dropped a jar of quince preserves. The rebuke had been frightened, not cruel, but fear could learn cruelty if allowed to rehearse it. Rosamund had lifted the jar herself and placed it safely on the shelf. Mistakes may be corrected without making a person smaller, she had said. Pippa had gone red to the ears. Yes, Your Grace. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sound like Mrs. Hodge. Then do not borrow her voice when your own will do better. The scullery girl had stared, as if someone had opened a window in a cellar. That was when Rosamund understood the work ahead. A house did not become kind because its mistress had once been hurt. Pain was not virtue, it was material. It could be shaped into mercy or sharpened into permission. She had chosen. Now in the breakfast room, Sebastian poured chocolate from the silver pot with the grave concentration of a man managing a treaty. "Milk?" he asked. "A little." "Sugar? 1 piece." He glanced up. "Are you certain? I don't wish to be remembered as tyrannical over chocolate." Her mouth curved. "1 piece, Sebastian, as my Duchess commands." The title rested between them without crushing her. That still surprised her. Once, rank had felt like something other people used to close doors. Now it sounded different because he had never asked her to disappear inside it. She sat, and he waited until she was settled before taking the chair opposite. There were rolls under a white cloth, strawberries in a blue dish, butter molded with a small crest, and a single white rose in a glass. No servant stood waiting to measure how long she took to eat. No woman reclined with borrowed mourning across her shoulders. No one used gratitude as a leash. Rosamund lifted the cup and let the warmth move into her hands. "I thought safety would feel simpler," she said. Sebastian did not answer too quickly. He had learned that not every wound wanted immediate consolation. "What does it feel like?" "A room I keep expecting someone to enter and take away." His face changed, but he did not reach across the table. "Then we shall let it remain, morning after morning, until expectation tires of being wrong." The tenderness of that almost undid her. She looked toward the windows, where Sussex light lay across the lawn, and a gardener carried lavender in a basket. "I do not want Brackenlay to be only a beautiful house. No, I want it to be a house where no woman pays for shelter with silence. Then it will be, not because I say so once." She turned back. "Rules matter, but habits matter more. Rules are read when someone fears being caught. Habits are what people do when no one important is watching." He nodded, and the pride in his eyes was not the pride of ownership. It was recognition. "Then we will build habits. Pippa must be trained properly. Not merely promoted because I am fond of her." "Agreed. The new housekeeper must keep accounts of discipline as well as stores." "A girl corrected in anger should have somewhere to speak." "Agreed. And no servant is to be called grateful when obedience is what is meant." Sebastian's gaze softened. "That phrase will be abolished from the estate by noon. You are very obedient this morning. Don't grow accustomed to it." "I intend to argue about the east pasture after breakfast." Rosamund laughed before she could make the sound elegant. It came out unguarded, bright enough to surprise them both. Sebastian laughed too, low and rare, and the room changed around it. It became less formal, less inherited, more theirs. After breakfast, they walked through the lower rooms together. Sebastian did not hover before her, or announce her kindness as if displaying a jewel. He stood beside her, while she spoke with the cook about wages, with the new housekeeper about rest days, and with Pippa about training younger maids without frightening them into obedience. The servants watched carefully. Rosamund knew they would not trust one morning, nor should they. Trust was not commanded into being. It was proved, repeated, and protected when inconvenient. Near midday, a letter arrived from Lady Marian, full of sharp advice and one instruction underlined twice. Rosamund was not to become saintly, because saints were tiresome and usually badly dressed. Sebastian read it over her shoulder and declared Lady Marian a terror to complacent households. Rosamund said that was precisely why she loved her. By evening, when the sky turned gold over the Sussex fields, the silver tray had been cleaned and placed not in a locked cabinet, but on the sideboard of the breakfast room. Sebastian had asked twice whether she preferred it hidden. Both times she had said no. Hidden things had done enough harm in Calderwick House. Let the tray live where light could find it. Rosamund stood before it after the servants withdrew. The silver was cool beneath her fingertips. It no longer felt like a command. It no longer asked her to carry another woman's shame, another family's lie, or another household's appetite for silence. It was only silver, old and marked, bearing an engraving from a woman who had once belonged here, and from a house that now had room for another. Sebastian stopped in the doorway, giving her the moment before entering it. "Are you all right?" he asked. She looked at the tray, the warm windows, the table where he had served her by choice, and the man who had learned that protection did not need to stand in front of love to prove itself. "Yes," she said. "For the first time in a very long while, I think I am." He came to stand beside her, close but not enclosing, and together they looked out toward the darkening lawn. Brackenley Hall settled into evening with every window lit. No one had been made small to preserve that warmth. No one had been silenced to keep peace polished. Behind them, the tray remained on the sideboard, no longer burden, evidence, or accusation, but part of a morning freely given. Rosamund Ellery, Duchess of Calderwick, had once carried another woman's shame through a silent house. Now she stood in her own home with empty hands, holding nothing that was not hers by choice.